o'clock. I was commenting that now that we're meeting on Zoom for everything, on time is different. You got to be on time. 1 minute late is late, right?
No, everyone made it. It's still 6 o'clock.
Still 6 o'clock.
Yeah.
Let's go ahead and get started.
Sam, let me know when we're good to go. Sam Quantz.
We're good.
Okay, thank you.
All right. I'd like to welcome everybody to the Salt Lake City School District Board of Education meeting for tonight, December 1st, 2020 at 6 o'clock p.m. So welcome to the board members. We've got all the board members here. Michelle Tuitupo representing Precinct 1, Mike Nemelka representing Precinct 2, Catherine Kennedy representing Precinct 3, Nate, Vice President Salazar representing Precinct 4, Sam Hansen representing Precinct 5, myself, Melissa Ford, representing Precinct 6, and board member Sweat, Christy, welcome, representing Precinct 7. And I'd also like to acknowledge our association reps that do such a good job of representing our employee groups. Cindy Mills represents Leopa, our office professionals. Thank you, Cindy. Ben Rowley for transportation, Eric Adams for buildings and grounds, Dallin Miller, our SLCSD rep, our administrators, and James Tobler representing our educators. Thank you to them for all that they do. As we start, I'd like to begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. If you'll stand and repeat after me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you for joining me with that. We have a couple really fun recognitions tonight. I'm really excited for this. And I'm going to turn the time to the superintendent to introduce these recognitions.
Thanks. So we have Julie Lewis here, and Julie is over at Wasatch Elementary. Do you want to introduce the video, Julie, or do you want me to show the video first?
I think the video pretty much explains everything, and I'd just like to say thank you. And yeah, the video will say it all.
Okay. Let's get it going here. Let's see. Okay. Okay, here we go.
Hi, I'm Lisa DeFrance, and I'm a proud fourth grade teacher at Wasatch Elementary, and I'm on the finance committee here at the school.
Hi, I'm Julie Lewis, and I'm the art instructor at Wasatch Elementary School.
My name is Lori Shea, and I am the art instructor at Washington Elementary.
How are children feeling with what's going on in the world today? What message do children want to send to others during this time? The work of the Wasatch Art Committee is to ensure that the arts programming that is at the core of Wasatch Elementary mission runs smoothly, as well as cultivate and launch new programming. Prior to March 2020's move to remote learning, the committee had been discussing ways to bring the elementary schools that feed into Bryant Middle School into contact with one another through a shared art project. The idea was to create community between these students by using the arts as a vehicle to share their backgrounds and stories. The COVID-19 pandemic presented us with this opportunity. The community quilt collaboration between Wasatch and Washington Elementary Stars was conceived. The project's goal was to provide students a way to process, share, and document their feelings and experiences. Each square tells a singular story of time, place, and emotion, but put together, they document a community in crisis coming together to tell a larger story.
I was so excited when Karen and Julie asked Washington students to participate in this project. The spring, it was kind of scary and we didn't know what to expect. And the students were given a chance to express their feelings in this project. And it's always good to remember that our community is much larger than our one small little school.
We were so excited with the response we got from both Wasatch Elementary students and Washington Elementary students when we sent out the prompt of what are children feeling in this time, and having them respond and feeling like they were both part of the same community in that response to what was happening and what was going on. The thought was that we wanted them to come to Bryant together, having shared this art experience, and be able to see their art on the wall there. So to that end, we created 4 different pieces of art from what we got back, and we combined both Wasatch and Washington Elementary students just randomly so that they stood on their own as a combination of these communities. We are going to offer one to the district, one to Bryant SLCSD, one to Washington Elementary, and one to Wasatch Elementary School. So it will be in the halls and remind us of this moment. It's a piece of ephemera. It's not going to last forever, but hopefully the same can be said of the pandemic.
I'm Deborah Candler, principal at Wasatch Elementary School, and I am so excited about this project. We have talked about it for many years. I talked about collaborating with other schools in our district to do something like this, and I am just looking forward to many more collaborative art projects.
John Kelly, I'm the principal here at Washington Elementary. We want to say thank you to Wasatch and their community for inviting us to be part of this quilt project, and that we're also including Bryant Middle School. I think it's an amazing opportunity for us to all collaborate together, especially in this time of COVID, and to send something to the school that we all feed our students into, Bryant Middle School.
Matt Smith, I'm the principal here at SLCSD Bryant Middle School.
And I'm Rachel Fletcher, I'm the assistant.
This is such an amazing idea. We love the collaboration between our theater elementary schools. We only have our students for 2 years here, and that's just not enough time. So anything that we can do to build some collaboration and get people to know each other before they get here is going to make things so much better once the students are ours.
We super appreciate this. I think it's going to be so fun for kids to come and see their work up at a school, and I just can't wait to have kids in the building for them to see this. It's awesome.
So this is the piece we made for the district. I hope you will accept it as the culmination of our collaboration with the feeder schools, Bryant SLCSD, and all the kids in the Salt Lake District.
Okay, thanks, Julie. That's awesome. So good. There was a thunderous roar of clap there that you maybe could not hear because people were muted, but it was quite amazing.
I appreciate that. And
Thank you so much, Julie. Do you have anything else you'd like to add to that?
No, just thanks for letting us,
Oh, you're muted, Julie.
Sorry. Did you mute me, Larry?
I did not. I would not. I would not.
Just proving there's a few silver linings you can find in whatever's going on whenever. We're so resilient, our students are. It was really fun to find that super positive thing and moment for everybody to join into. So that's all. I will leave you. And thanks for letting me present that.
Thank you so much, Julie. I think processing things through art is an amazing gift you've given to our students. Thank you. We have 3 other recognitions that we'd like to do tonight. We have 3 board members who've been with us for varying lengths of time, and every board member is an important addition to our board, and it's only together that we make decisions and that we come together to focus on students and do what's best for our communities. And it's with sadness that we'll have 3 board members leaving us, and this is their last board meeting. And so we'd like to take a minute to recognize those 3 board members and tell them thank you. And I want to give them each an opportunity to say a few words if they'd like as well. We have first up, we have board member Sam Hansen. He's been representing Precinct 5. He stepped in to, I'm going to be emotional, sorry. He stepped in to fill the seat that his mother held with grace and dignity and exceptional representation of her community for many years. And Sam, you've been a lovely extension of your mother, different, but every bit as wonderful. And we will miss you. So thank you for the time you've spent on the board. It's been a short 1.5 years, but we're really grateful for the time you've been with us. Would you like to take a couple of minutes, Sam?
Sure. Thanks, Melissa. And that means a lot to me. And, you know, there's obviously a ton that I'd love to say about my mother. She was an extraordinary woman, as you all know. And I've often felt like kind of a blunt instrument sitting in her shoes, but it's been an honor to work with all of you, fellow board members. Larry, I just have so much appreciation for you stepping up into this role at this moment. I think it's tremendously courageous, and each of my colleagues, really, I even when we've disagreed, I feel a lot of respect and admiration for each of you. And I'm tremendously grateful to our teachers and principals. I often tell people that I feel like if I'm successful at all, if I've been successful at all, it's because I've inherited a bunch of people that trusted me because they trusted my mother. And I think that those relationships are really important and rarer than they should be. So I hope that we'll continue to cultivate them. And I'm excited for Mohammed, who will be stepping into my precinct representative role to start in January. So thank you all for what a wild ride it's been. But thank you for all your friendship and support and companionship.
Thank you, Sam. Next, I'd like to recognize board member Michael Nemelka, who represents Precinct 2 and the Glendale Poplar Grove area. Really appreciate the advocacy and passion you bring to the position, Mike. We will miss having you as a member of our board. If you'd like to take a moment just to address the board and the community, please do.
Well, let's see. I'd like to say, you know, it hasn't been a good ride for me. You know, I don't think we've accomplished a whole heck of a lot, but other people think we have. I'd rather like seen a little higher pay raise for the hourly employee and the subs and the paras. You know, we didn't get that accomplished. I'd like to have seen that. I hope new board members and you or the old board members are going through truth and taxation in August and put some money out of capital projects and where you can pay them. Give them a nice raise next year. I like to see that. I like to see the 6th grades taken out of Glendale and put back into the elementaries here in my precinct, which they're all out of now. They're in 6th grades, they need them to bolster up their thing. I'm apprehensive because this new board's going to have to go through a lot of boundary problems. You know, I look to that, and I look at the one elementary we got now in our school districts. It's 140 students, and we're putting out almost $2 million a year for it. You know, it's just you just have to change, and I understand you're going to have to deal with all that next year. So I understand what's going to be. You know, I hope you can make the decisions and take care of these kids. That's more important than anything, that we make sure these kids are taken care of and that they learn something, not just mark time in school. make them responsible for their grades, what they're doing. Maybe do some other different things. Other than that, I've always lost my temper a lot of times, and it's just me. I guess when you turn 80, you can lose your temper, and people can just look at you and say, "Well, he's just an old man. He doesn't know nothing." But anyway, other than that, I'll never do it again. I'll tell you that. I'd never run for another office in my life. I probably won't be around much longer to do it. Anyway, I'd never do it again. I wouldn't suggest to anybody. Anyway, that's about all I got to say.
Well, that's a lot. Thank you, Mike. Really appreciate what you've put into the last 4 years. Thank you. And finally, I'd like to recognize board member Michelle Tuitupo. She's been with us the shortest amount of time, just I think since last March or April. And we've really enjoyed the collaboration we've had with you, Michelle, and the really strong abilities you brought to our board. So thank you. We will miss you. And I'd like to give you a moment to speak as well.
Thanks, Melissa. Of course, I had to prepare something because I can't do off the cuff. But I would like to thank the board for giving me the opportunity to serve for the past 7 months representing Precinct 1. It has been quite a learning experience, but I'm a lifelong learner, so I've appreciated the knowledge of what it takes to run a school district, especially one as rich and diverse as the Salt Lake City School District. Thank you, Superintendent Madden, and our district leadership and teams. You all have been working tirelessly, I know. And there's so many moving pieces to running this entire district, especially during these unusual times. So kudos to you and thank you. Thank you to our amazing and resilient teachers. I had the pleasure of meeting many of you during our SEC meetings and doing some really fun introductory meetings at the beginning of the summer as I was just starting to get my feet wet. And as a former teacher, I know that lesson planning takes a lot of time and creativity, but I cannot imagine doing all of this during a pandemic on top of all of it. So thank you for all that you do and all that you continue to do for our students. And to our district parents, thank you. I know it has not been a smooth journey since March. We've had many bumps along the way, but your commitment to our schools and our community is very clear from the many emails that we have received. So thank you for all that you do. Finally, to our students, I want to thank you for all of your hard work because you are the district. And I know it's been hard, but I would challenge you to take this time to learn something new, become a lifelong learner. So whatever that looks like for you. If I may borrow from the SLCSD motto, I encourage you to change reality and to take healthy risks. Read a new book, learn a new song, discover a new hobby. Take this time to figure out you. To our continuing board members and our new incoming board members, I wish all of you the very best. And again, I thank you for this time that I've had to be able to serve my community. Take care, and hopefully one day we'll be able to meet in person and share some Ben and Jerry's together. Thanks.
Thank you, Michelle. Superintendent, do you have anything you'd like to add to these recognitions?
Yeah, I'd just like to say thanks to all of you for the time and effort that you put into this. It's really obvious, and the passion. And I know that, the passion can sometimes be intense, but, that's because people care and they care a lot. And so I just want to thank all of you for the time that you've done. And I really hope I still get to see you afterwards.
Again, thank you. So we've said thank you, but you're not off the hook because we've got a board meeting in front of us. And so with that, moving on to the consent agenda, I would take a motion for the consent agenda with the request from a board member that the at-risk definition be removed and move to the discussion.
I'll move that we accept the consent agenda with the exception of the at-risk definition consisting of the purchasing and accounting reports, the human resource services report, minutes from the board meetings of November 3rd and 17th, the foreign exchange agency list, and the updated board policies. C7, G14, G15, G20, I9, I11, I16, I21, and S1.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, so I have a motion to approve the consent agenda with the exception of the at-risk definition, and a second from Catherine. Any discussion? Okay, seeing none, let's go ahead and vote on the consent agenda.
Michelle Tutbo, yes.
Mike Nomelka, yes.
Catherine Kennedy, yes.
Nate Salazar, yes.
Samuel Hansen, yes.
Melissa Ford, yes.
Christy Sweat, yes.
All right. The consent agenda is approved. And now we will move to our request to speak. Superintendent, last I heard, we had two requests to speak tonight.
We have one.
We have
one person in the waiting room.
Okay.
And that's Amy Fehlberg, and I will admit her.
Awesome.
Hi, Amy. You can go ahead. You've got 3 minutes.
Okay. Good evening. Please be leaders and make decisions for our district as a whole. Do not push decisions to school principals through alternative reentry. If you do this, you will put principals in the position of taking sides, which will cause painful divisions within our school communities. No one will benefit from this. Please remember that the science on COVID is young, and there is so much we do not know. A physician reported in the last meeting's public comment that closing schools was going to lead to decreased life expectancy. The article he referred to was based on one study conducted in Argentina during a time when teachers were striking. Any information you need that you use to make your decisions needs to be carefully reviewed, and it needs to fit our current situation. Please share mental health resources via your main page. There are many resources in the community that you could be promoting. No one is benefiting from your lack of action. Please look at what's going right with remote learning and share these practices with our district and others. We can set the example for how to do this well. Your failure to provide solid examples for all is not helping anyone. Please look at the evidence that is showing that hybrid models are not working for teachers, and acknowledge that due to quarantines, all face-to-face learning statewide is a hybrid or expanded classroom option. Teaching is already a hard profession. Articles in national publications are all saying the same thing. Teachers are exhausted. Your failure to put teachers first is harming our students and will have costs to our district that will be incredibly hard to repair. Your failure to survey teachers about their current perspectives is putting the whole district in a vulnerable position. Do you even know how many of your teachers won't come back if you force them to return? Do you have a plan to replace them? Given that you can't provide subs on a regular basis, I am very concerned about actually replacing full-time teachers. I hope you have started a plan for summer school options to support those students who have fallen behind. We will need options that go throughout the summer and reach out to students in a variety of ways. Finally, Utah is a state that has a large population that does not support vaccinations. There are articles from June 2018, June 2019, and most recently October 2020 about the lack of support for vaccines in our state. Right now, there's a great deal of talk about how vaccines are going to get us out of this pandemic. How are you planning on keeping teachers, administrators, staff, and students safe when parents have the right to not vaccinate their children? Further, given that no vaccine is showing 100% efficacy, it is likely that continued safety measures such as masks will be needed for some time to come. Have you budgeted and prepared for the steps that will be needed to keep us all safe? Thank you for your time, and if there's anything I can do to be helpful, please let me know.
Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. We appreciate your advocacy. We have next up on our agenda is a report, but our student board member, Dottie Uman, is having some technical difficulties. So as she's working to join us, let's go ahead and move to the discussion agenda. She thinks it's her internet that's not working very well, so she should be up and running soon. But let's go ahead and move to the discussion agenda, item 1, which is the RDA with, we'll turn the time to Alan Kersley to lead this part of the discussion.
Okay, thank you, President Ford. Just to begin, let me do a quick brief description of RDAs. And so redevelopment agencies use what's called tax increment financing to help pay for infrastructure improvements, affordable housing, or other development related projects. So what tax increment financing is when a RDA project starts, the taxable base is frozen. So as the project continues to grow, as that taxable base grows, the incremental taxes generated by the increase in value, that goes to the RDA to help with the project, whereas the district and other taxpaying entities keep receiving the same tax base that they had before. And then as the project ends, the taxing entities then start receiving the entire tax increment at the end of those projects. So as taxing entities are faced with the question of, do we participate in an RDA project or do we not? There are a lot of things to look at, to analyze, and a lot of those were in the board exhibits that were there for your review. So what we would like the board to discuss and address is, would the board like to direct our Director of Over Policy and Legal Services to draft a policy regarding participation in RDA projects? So that is the direction we're looking at from the board at this time.
Thank you for that background, Alan. At our last meeting, we talked about this briefly, and board member Sweat asked Nate and I to go back and review a previous board meeting and direction from the board. And as I did that, the direction then was to lead us to this point, a discussion about whether we want to create this RDA as a policy. And we have attachments to the agenda. And I want to thank Alan and board member Hanson for his work on putting a lot of that together. You can see the in the attachments, the Canyons policy, some draft language, memo from the Utah School Board Association, the county policy, and the guiding document that we have already. So what I'd like to do is give the board an opportunity to weigh in on the direction that the business administrator, Alan Kersley, is looking for.
Can I start, Melissa?
Sure.
So I think it might be productive if, given that the policy subcommittee did talk about this, clearly I have opinions about it and I've expressed them, but since there was a policy subcommittee discussion, I would love to kind of hear from one of the three of you that serve on that subcommittee about what you talked about, because I think you had the same exhibits more or less, as well as a document that I sent, which was the county's report to the county council on the 9 line. And I sent that because I think it underscores the importance of just gathering as much information as possible about these projects. They noted in their report that this project, which assuming that the county approves it, which is the last taxing entity that we'll be looking at, and I think they actually looked at it today. I'm not sure what the outcome of that was, but if they approve it, it will trigger next year with a base year of the 2016 value of that area. So our income will revert to what it was in 2016 plus the 25% pass through. And this is not attached to this agenda, but I thought it was interesting to look at because the area has already grown by more than $100 million in taxable value between 2016 and this year, which was the last year on the in the report. So to me, that just underscores the importance of looking at the details of these policies, gathering information, or looking at the details of these projects is what I meant to say. So I will stop talking, and what I would love is if one of the members of the policy subcommittee might be willing to talk about the conversation they had about this.
Thanks,
Do you
Sam.
want to speak, Nate
Polly.
or Michelle? Okay. Do you want to speak, Nate?
No, please go ahead. You opened up first.
So I think that we have the Marmalade RDA that sits between Michelle and my district, and so we've been looking at that specifically, and that has been a less productive RDA for our district. And so I'm looking at that and thinking about some of the other things that have happened with RDAs that we think a policy would be a good idea for the district just as a way of monitoring. And we support city growth as a district. We certainly do. We support seeing good things happen for the city, but at the same time, we are appreciative of the legislature giving us this opportunity to weigh in on RDAs and the opportunity for us to reflect on what's best for our students. We need to think about our students and the fact that we have a lot of students with needs in our district, and that every dollar is really important to our students. So as we think about trading the benefits for an RDA, we need to think about it really carefully. So I think that as a policy committee, we thought really carefully about the fact that a policy would help us think about that. And we appreciated the guidance that Board Member Hansen had given us with this information and the careful work that he did as he evaluated all this information.
Thank you, Catherine. So any other discussion I want to hear from every board member kind of how you're feeling about this being a policy, guiding principles, where you're at with it. Christy, go ahead.
So first I want to thank Ellen and Sam, and obviously we've had great information given to us, by Kenyans, which, was by Leon Wilcox, which did a great job when he presented this at the conference. And I think that it's a good conversation for us to have about what our processes should be around the RDA. I do want to say that, for the length of time that I've been on the board, and obviously with Melissa and with Catherine, that I think that, over the years, we have thought very carefully about the RDA projects. And we've had very good people from the city that we've worked with and partnered with, that have come and talked to us about what the projects look like. And so I don't want the public to think that there's been any negligence whatsoever from the city, as they've talked to us about these projects and the importance behind economic growth. And I appreciate what Catherine said. I think it's important that we do think about, the impact on our students, and also what that tax base increment, as Alan talked about, is going to be frozen for the amount of time and how much money we, receive in, knowing that the money that from the growth, won't come into the district, which is money that we don't budget anyway until, the RDA is over. And so looking at, a policy or a guideline in some way, to help guide us through those conversations, I think is a great idea, and we've seen it, be a really positive thing. I know when Canyons put theirs forward is because they have multiple municipalities that they have to deal with. And so we're lucky, that we just have Salt Lake Cities, to work with and to really nurture those relationships, with the city and partner with them, because we do want economic development, in our city. And if we can partner with that, and it can be a benefit to us, like it was in the last conversation when we talked about, having affordable housing for families, because all of us know that we have got to have affordable housing for families to keep them in the city, which, in turn puts them into our schools. So I think that as this goes, forward into the policy committee, what I would say is, look at those guiding principles, because those were the guiding principles that Canyons used to put together their policy, and look at the examples that have been given to us. And then let's come back and talk about what the policy committee and what Ms. Kindle comes up with, and have a great discussion around, the future of how this board interacts with the redevelopment agency of Salt Lake City.
Thanks, Christy. Nate, go ahead.
Yeah, for sure. And I would just, want to thank everybody as well. Ms. Kindle and Alan, Business Administrator Kearsley, and Sam, for putting this together in the way that they have, along with our other extended partners in the city and in Canyons, and in the county as well. I also think that this should be something that we move to the policy subcommittee as well. I personally like the feel of it as being a policy, and I'm not going to overstate anything else that's been said, but the one aspect of a policy that I really like is that it gives us the opportunity to review it, on a fairly consistent basis, right? So it really gives us a chance to one, have something that's not only accessible, but something that we can review and tweak over time to meet the needs of our district and our students and and of course our families, along with our partners that we have in any of these ventures that we take with the city, through RDA opportunities that might come up in the future. So I would certainly support moving this to policy subcommittee and having Ms. Kindle draft something that we can weigh in on and of course bring back to the board for consideration.
Thanks, Nate. Michelle or Mike, do you have something you'd like to contribute? Okay. I'd like to echo what Nate said. Oh, go ahead, Christy. That's great. Go ahead.
I think both Catherine and I's hand went up at the same time.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, sorry.
I'll go. Since I just spoke, I'll have Catherine go, and then I can go after Catherine.
Okay, go ahead, Catherine.
I'm just hoping that since Sam has worked so much on this, that he and Ms. Kindle can work together on it before he leaves the board on January 5th or whatever the day is. If Board Member Hanson doesn't mind doing that.
Sure, and I actually think that you've done a lot of this work already as a policy subcommittee, and Alan, Business Administrator Kearsley, I should say, met with you all and met with Christina Kindle, our district council. And, given that we've had that conversation, I would trust Alan to go ahead and supervise that work. And if Christina, I know Christina has a very full plate at the moment, and I would say that we could also ask Patrick to help out if we needed another set of legal eyes. I wanted to add a couple things onto what was said, partially just to clarify things for the public, because I think we all are fairly aware of how this process has changed for school boards among the 7 of us. But what the public might not know that we're sort of alluding to in our conversation is that the law changed in 2016, I believe. So for many years, we had representation on a tax entity committee, and Christy was our representative on that committee for many years, and I'm sure did a fabulous job. But what happened in 2016 was the law changed, and so instead of having this tax entity committee that would kind of advise the RDA, school boards now have the power to say yes or no. And I think, there are great things that these projects could do. Like I think about, that bridge by West High that was built a few years ago when they were working on the train, right? And I think that had some RDA funding. I'm not sure, but I'm pretty sure it did. Maybe as a part of the Marmalade project, I'm not sure, or maybe probably the North Temple project. But anyway, that kind of thing I think is a great example of how this can be really beneficial, because obviously the school district isn't going to build a bridge over the freeway. But the city can do that, and that's a direct benefit to our students, that allows them to get to school and improves attendance and improves safety and improves their lives. What I worry about, and part of why I have sort of harped on this so much, is just that I think that, and this is no slight to the folks that work at the RDA, but they really have an existential need to keep making these projects happen, because if taxing entities don't contribute to them, then the RDA would simply cease to exist as an entity. So I think, from the research I've done talking to folks at the county and folks around the state, they're great at what they do. And I want to acknowledge that, but I also want to acknowledge that they have a tremendous wealth of resources that are devoted to doing one thing and getting money to do one thing and to keep doing that. And what I would love to see in this policy, and I think that we all probably more or less agree about this, is just for the board to remember that we have resources too, and that we can ask them to do things like studies, and that's in the draft that you see there. And I'm not terribly attached to any of the language that I drafted, and I trust Alan to supervise creating a policy that sort of recognizes the priorities from the discussions that he's been a part of. But I just think, the board needs a document to remind us that we can ask them to pay for a study. And actually, I had a conversation with Representative Joel Briscoe, who's my representative in the legislature, and he had a great idea, which was to do a study at the beginning and the end paid for by the RDA. And I think that would be a great thing to put in this policy, because if you were to do a study if you do a study at the beginning, it helps the board make the decision. If you do a study at the end, none of us are going to be around in 20 years when these projects that we signed off on last year are finished. It would be great if somebody showed up and told the board, well, this is what really happened, and this is how it affected enrollment, and this is how it affected housing prices, and this is how much money was diverted, and this is how much money they said you were going to get at the end of it, and this is how much you're really getting. So I think that kind of thing is something we should all want as stewards of very precious, very rare education dollars. So that, and then the other thing that Melissa actually pointed out to me, which I thought was really thoughtful and smart, was that we could just say in the policy that the trigger year, meaning the year that the collection starts, and the base year have to be the same. So I would love to make a motion if that's okay, and we can discuss it a little further.
Yes, I know we've got some board members that still want to talk, but I will allow you to make the motion, Sam, after board members have their comments. Go ahead, Christy. No? Okay. Mike, did you have something you wanted to add to this? Want to give both Michelle and Mike an opportunity to weigh in.
Yeah, I just want to hear what old Sam said. He's right. They changed the law in 2016, so now we have a firmer voice on it. And I think we ought to come up with a policy. And I'm glad they put the work in, and I appreciate the work they did to get it. We need that policy to protect the school district. And like you said, the North Temple project never got off its whatever was supposed to happen, and so we put they put a lot of money in that. It hasn't shown yet, but I think this school district needs to have a policy that, like Sam said, because of the change in the law. And I look at the work that they did, and boy, it's great. I'd just vote for it tonight if I thought it was completely the way they wanted it. But I won't be around to vote for it. But anyway, as I go out, it's good, Sam. Good job.
Mike. Thanks, Mike. I want to echo what Mike said and what board members have said. I appreciate the work that's gone into this. I would want to make sure that any policy language was not prescriptive, that it didn't bind the hands of future boards. I like what Nate was saying. I think he's right that if it's a policy and it's something we revisit on a regular basis, that's good for the board. And by putting it in policy, it also puts it in a placeholder, a place for us to review regularly and easy to find. So that's my 2 cents. Any other discussion before I let Sam make a motion? Okay, go ahead, Sam.
Okay, so I move that we direct Business Administrator Kersley, in consultation with the superintendent and board leadership, to supervise the drafting of an RDA policy based on the policy subcommittee's discussion, the materials attached to tonight's agenda and tonight's discussion, including President Ford's recommendation that the base year and the tax year be the same, and Representative Briscoe's recommendation that there be an option for a third-party study paid for the RDA at the end of each project as well as the beginning. And I further move that this finished policy be placed on the consent agenda at our January 5th meeting, and that if Business Administrator Kersley and board leadership deem necessary, they may make use of our board legal counsel for an extra set of legal eyes.
Second.
Okay, so that needs to be first. Thanks for that. I've got a motion in a second, but we do need to move it to action first. And there's lots of parts to that motion, so I'm sure we'll want to discuss once we get to action. But can we just make a motion, Sam, to move it to action?
Or I move that my previously stated motion be moved to action.
Okay.
And I just want to offer a friendly amendment right away, which is that that our new policies always go to discussion agendas rather than consent. So I would say that we would not put it on the consent agenda. We'd put it on a discussion agenda.
Sure, I'll accept that.
Okay. Recognizing that this is just moving that motion to action, which we will then discuss the details of when we get to action. Okay. Any discussion about moving it to action? Let's go ahead and vote on moving this Sam's motion to action.
Michelle Treatbo, yes.
Mike DeMalka, yes.
Catherine Kennedy, yes.
Samuel Hanson, yes. Nate, you were muted if you want to restate your.
Thank you. Sorry about that. Nate Salazar, yes.
Melissa Ford, yes.
Christy Sweat, yes.
Okay, so that's moved to action. Thank you for the discussion, board members. I appreciate it. Now we'd like to move backward in our agenda for a few minutes and welcome our student board member, Arundhati Uman. I appreciate your resiliency. It can't be fun to have technical issues as you're trying to join a board meeting where you're presenting, but we're happy to have you. And I'll turn the time maybe first to the superintendent to introduce this and then to Dottie.
Sure. Thanks, Dottie, for preparing this. And Dottie's going to talk to us about a student voting plan that she's observed in other places, found a lot of information on. And so I'm going to just turn it right over to Dottie. I'll make you, do you need the screen, Dottie, to share?
No, you guys are going to be looking at my face today. Okay. Thank you so much, President Ford and Superintendent Madden. Okay, so I just want to make clear that this is an entirely separate resolution measure rather than the other thing that was brought up at one of the previous board meetings, which was allowing students from other schools to ask to be the next student board member. That's entirely separate. I support that, and this is a new thing. So this resolution is about allowing students aged 16 through 18 to vote for their school board members. Right now, that's not allowed. The current voting age is 18 and above. This is not something that the school district itself can vote on, but it is something that the school district itself can provide its direct investment towards. I'm not really looking technically for a vote here, but I'm looking for the school district support in a research document that will then go towards the legislative pathways that are necessary to make this happen. Looking from a broader picture here, Utah has one of the most abysmal youth voting records of any state in the nation. If you look at the statistics, Utah youth have a really low voter turnout. In the 2014 midterm elections, 19.9% of all registered 18 through 29-year-olds actually voted. In Utah, this number was only 8.1%. So this is a direct testament to the dire lack of youth exposure to the ballot. And currently in the elections that we just saw, 37,000 voters in Salt Lake County did not complete their full ballot. Many of them filled out their presidential candidate bubble and submitted their ballot as is without moving towards the entire ballot. And in states like Utah, the local ballot and those municipal elections are where the differences and changes are really made. Those seats are really, really important. And it's important that students learn that from a young age. Studies show that when voting and the importance of voting are taught in conjunction in high school, students are 40% more likely to vote and to continue to vote throughout their lifetimes. In Salt Lake City especially, it's really hard for students and young people to see their frustrations and their anger and their vote going to something that has a direct impact. When you're voting for a presidential candidate, you can see that there's millions and millions of voters that are alongside with you, which makes it a lot harder to see that direct change. Whereas with ward elections, that one vote really, really matters, and it's as direct as you can see it. And I want to give all students that opportunity to see their vote create a direct change in their community. Students are really invested within their own educations. We've seen students protest on the streets, run up to the Capitol, and I want to make sure that those same voices are hitting the ballot box and that their votes count. And so one of the ways that we can do that is by involving the youth vote at a younger age. Currently, right now, students are only allowed to say in their own education when they are 18 years old, and by the time they've aged out of the education system. And so this is going to allow students to have a say in their education while they're still part of the system. This year was the first year that my parents had a say in who their president was. I helped them at the kitchen table, we filled out the full ballot. And so this is for students like me all over Salt Lake City School District who have not had a direct say in their education like most families might. So this is for them to have a voice in education. And so I owe the students of Salt Lake City everything. Thank you for entrusting me with your views and perspectives and for letting me stand up on your behalf. For any students watching, this is for you.
Thank you, Dottie. Board members, Dottie attached to the agenda, and public as well. You can see the attachments that she sent. This is a report, so I don't anticipate board direction, but I would love to hear what the board is thinking about where Dottie's headed with this. So board, if you want to ask some questions of Dottie, superintendent, if you want to as well, feel free to weigh in.
Well, I think you've seen some examples of this, right, in your research in other places. Can you speak to that just a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So this actually came into fruition at the beginning of August. So I reached out to the former student board member of Los Angeles Unified School District, Tyler Okeke, and he's really incredible. And he passed the same resolution through the Los Angeles School Board. And so that's currently on the ballot now for their upcoming election. This has also gone through in Oakland, Maryland, several other areas across the country. So You know, there is room for this, there's space. It's already been established elsewhere. And, you know, key community players in Salt Lake City have already come forth, which including Voterize, the League of Women Voters, Black Lives Matter Salt Lake City, and the Rose Park Community Council.
Thank you. I think it's such a, I mean, I think it's such a really smart idea to get people involved, and especially to get them involved like you with what you're talking about at a local level, because you do see very directly the results of those things and the direct impact on individuals. So I think it's a wonderful idea.
Go ahead, Catherine.
So Dottie brought this to me at the beginning when she started on the board. She's been thinking about this issue for many months. And so it's been carefully thought through on her behalf. And she's also, I know, approached some Utah legislators already and who've expressed support for this initiative. So I would love to see us maybe move it to an action agenda. I know that it's not our decision, but maybe we could think about whether we as a board support it, and maybe, like I said, it's not something that we vote on as our decision, but maybe we could offer our support to her if she thinks it's helpful. I would look towards other board members to see what they think. Of course, we'll have a new sitting board. If I'd like to hear from Dottie if she thinks that would be helpful. The other thing I just would like to add is that I have heard from Voterize and other organizations that if students vote in their first election, they're likely to vote for their entire lives. So it makes a big impact on students' voting patterns if they vote when they're 16 through 18 years old. So thanks, Dottie, for your hard work, and I've enjoyed talking to you and working with you on this project.
Thank you so much, as have I. In regards to your initial question, you know, perhaps this does not need a full vote, maybe consensus support, but what I would like is, I'm totally open to creating a report myself, but that report would need to go to legislators or whichever avenue that this can go through. But when that report is compiled, either with the help of the superintendent or without, I would like to have the board seal of approval and the board's seal of investment into this idea.
Thanks, Dottie. Go ahead, Christy.
Well, excuse my ignorance, but maybe Dottie, you know this. So the would it have to be created as a bill, or is it a you said an initiative that was done in California, and then is it just passed locally? It doesn't have to be approved federally. It's just a state decision. Can you just walk us through what you've been told, what that process is?
Yeah, absolutely. I've kind of been like all over the place trying to figure out the answer to this question. What I do know is that this can happen in Utah no matter what. There's already established legal precedent for Utah. Nowhere in the Utah laws does it say that you have to be 18 to vote. So that already opens up that avenue. Then there's also the bill that was passed a couple years ago, I think, which allows 17-year-olds to vote in primary elections, given that they turn 18 by the general election. So given that established precedent and the fact that there's no Utah law specifically barring this from happening, that can definitely come into play. In regards to whether this is a municipal decision, a local decision, that's something that's a little bit more muddy from what I've seen, because the cities that were able to pass this just through their own city, such as Los Angeles, Berkeley, somewhere in Maryland, but they were all able to do that because they're charter cities. Salt Lake City is not a charter city. So that's one of the things that I can kind of anticipate. But either way, if this goes through the state, I'm in it for the long game because this is important to me. And so even if it's going to take years, I'll be there, and hopefully we can still make this happen.
So the suggestion then for me would be that the way that Salt Lake, versus, going into an action agenda is to actually put together an action plan, which would be do we help, gather legislators together, to have a Zoom call, to have this presented, find out the best way, if it's through a bill that we want to do it, or if it's through an initiative on the ballot, which then would take signatures, we'd have to gather signatures, to have that done. So what I'm thinking is, why not, maybe, I'm not sure if it would be through Yandri or, along with Miss Kindle, but maybe it would be Yandri starting there, to help Dottie look at what's the best pathway. And then for our board, to get behind those action steps, because we're all linked into other board members across the state. So if it is a state initiative that we have to put on the books, then we would be able to collaborate with our colleagues across the state. So that would kind of be my suggestion, Melissa and Nate, is for us to look at a way that we can collaborate, with Dottie and with maybe Yandri, looking at what's the next step, to really get this in the forefront of our legislators and see where it can go.
Yeah, I like that direction, Christy. Any other comments from board members? I think I'd echo that. I might say, I think with Yandri's help and Yandri, I hope you'd be willing to step in and guide Dottie through this. I'd also maybe like to recommend that we ask board member Kennedy to help Dottie through this as well. I think she's already been a little bit of a guide to Dottie on this. And obviously would want to continue the conversation too. Maybe that's something Christy and Catherine could participate in as we kind of move through the process. And obviously it's not something that our board gets to decide on, but we certainly want to support you through the process, because I think that there's you put a lot of work in already and some really good research to support how this would benefit our community over the long term. So thank you, Dottie. Any other, Nate, I see your hand. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just would echo, what everybody says, and Dottie, what I'm going to say isn't far off of what everybody else has said. I support this, and I think this is something that we should pursue as a board and get behind this with you. I think the only other piece I would add is, a lot of work has been done over the last number of years to register students at the age of 16. And so I think that'd be some interesting data points for you to look into, to see how many students or how many people in that age range of 16 or under 18 have been registered already, or participate in that on an annual basis. And I'm sure there are ways to get that through the Lieutenant Governor's office, or even through the county's office, right? Since we're focusing on Salt Lake City. But those are just a couple of pointers that I think would be good for you and Catherine, and I'm happy to help make those connections as well. But you have my support, and let's figure out how we can get this in front of the right people and develop the right process to make sure that we can do this.
Yeah, thank you so much. I don't know how to say this, but like a huge thank you to everybody here. I know Ms. Chatwin does a lot of work with voting rights, and I'm really grateful for all your support. Thank you for helping make history today.
So what I'd like to then suggest is that we, Dottie, connect you and Ms. Chatwin. And then if you'd like to reach out to those individual board members to support through that too, I think that would be great. So thank you, Dottie. We really appreciate your hard work. You're a very engaged student board member, and we're lucky to have you. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. We will now move to item number 2 on our discussion agenda, and thanks to the board and for being flexible as we've kind of jumped back and forth. Alternative reentry for schools, a superintendent.
Okay, thank you. I want to start off by saying I don't have any recommendations, and I won't be asking for any decisions or votes tonight, but I feel like you've given us the latitude to do the work. And so, but I did want to revisit the kind of options one option that we laid out last time. I want to give a couple of notes though before we start, President Ford and I were in a meeting with the health department this morning, and just give you just a few updates from that. From our previous meeting from last week, though, it was I thought it was quite interesting that we had 2 communities in our school district that had been some of the highest in terms of positivity rates for a long period of time. And according to the health department, and this is from a week ago, though, they weren't even in the top 10 anymore. So I think that that speaks to our efforts to help try to keep things under control. They told us today from the health department, but there's been a slight decrease in ICU utilization, which I think is an important thing to pay attention to. They did say positivity rates have decreased, but kind of in a wait and see mode because Thanksgiving. We're going to have to see what sort of fallout comes from Thanksgiving, and they said they would expect to see kind of the results or effects of that starting next week. So it's going to take a minute to see what sort of impact that's going to have. I mean, people project all kinds of things, but we'll see the reality starting in about a week or so. Vaccines appear to still be a ways off for educators. While there's a lot of conversations around vaccines, and I think that we'll have some vaccines coming into the state pretty soon, where educators are on the list, it's going to be, frontline healthcare workers first. And the opinion of the Salt Lake County Health Department today was that they thought the earliest vaccines could be available for educators would probably be sometime in March. And but I think that's kind of to be determined, more to come on that. I just want to share my screen. I'm going to go back to, I'm just going to go back to a little bit of information that I shared from the presentation last time, just to kind of review the option that we presented and just talk about it just briefly. But this is the alternative reentry option. We had it as early reentry last time, but in an effort to try to create a little more latitude to allow individual schools to meet the needs of their communities, change that terminology to alternative reentry. But this is the same information that we had last time. I mean, elementary schools would have options to vary from the district plan by following our shared governance process, really is what it is. I mean, they would create a plan, talk about their dates. They would get approval from their school leadership and performance network director, get stakeholder input from their community, and then seek consensus from their faculty and staff at the school. And that would be based, of course, on input from the school community council, which is a mostly parent group, and from the school improvement council, which is the teacher group within the school. And then within that, the plan requirements. And this is a very brief piece of this. I mean, I think like we've said it so many times, we've really I think we're very prepared at the school level. At the point that we feel that it's safe to go back into school, I think we have the personal protective equipment and the mitigation strategies lined up that we're going to need. But the plan would have to include how we will still maintain a high quality remote option. And I think it's fair to look at that as the default option, and that we would be then creating a second option, which would be an in-person instruction for those that chose it. And again, we want them to just reiterate the mitigation strategies that they have in place. And then really the last thing is, we did talk at one point in time about teacher data, and that was the one kind of missing piece. And I had a very brief conversation this afternoon, and that piece turns out to be a little bit more complicated than comparing the students within our district in Salt Lake City that are mostly in remote with those around us. And because teachers are not necessarily living in the communities where they're teaching. And so kind of still having conversations about that. I did want to just say one other part, within these options, I think it's important that we acknowledge or say out loud that really I think the latitude that we have is important, because we don't have any schools that are going to be entirely remote. and we don't have any schools that are going to be entirely in person. I mean, I think even we see that in the districts around us. I mean, some portion of the population is going to choose to be remote, and some other portion is going to choose in person at the time that we make that possible. And the thing is, we need that. That's the information that we need to even start planning the next steps. And I also acknowledge that, like we said at the last board meeting, it's a little ways off before we start. And I think seeing what happens from Thanksgiving, it might give us some indication of what we think could happen over winter break, and then how that's going to all weigh into the equation. But in terms of the schools themselves and remote and in person, it's going to be a spectrum. And I wouldn't be surprised if we had some schools that were mostly remote, or some schools that were mostly in person, but all schools are going to have some portion of each of those things. And so that's our next steps. So I was going to turn it over to Tiffany just briefly to talk about a very short survey that we have. And once we have that information, then we can kind of take the next step in planning. So Tiffany, I'll kind of turn it over to you for a second. I don't know if you want to screen share or not.
No, I think we can just talk through it. We are going to put out, and it will come centrally, but it will appear to come from all of our schools and principals directly to families. It explains some of the steps that we've taken to make sure that classrooms and schools are safe, including, as the superintendent said, masks, social distancing, markings on the floor, all of the different things that schools have had in place recently while they've been going through the small groups and bringing those students successfully and safely into schools and classes. And then, give some links for some other information if parents have questions, and then ask them on the start dates, the 3 start dates that the board approved at our last meeting, the 25th, January 25th for the week of January 25th for pre-K, K1, and the subsequent week for 2-3, and the week after that for 4-6. And then it just simply asks, at this point, will your child stay in remote, or will your child come back into the classroom? We are having this translated into our top English and our top 5 languages. So students will have that opportunity. We also know, since we're emailing this out, 6% of our district does not have an email address linked into their child's record, because it will go right to the parent of the child. So we will send a list of any families that we have at those schools that do not have an email address to the school, so that they know that they need to contact that group of parents and families individually in another manner. We'll also make sure that there's a link that the school can use if parents want to come in and do the transitional registration there at the school with either the school secretary or the principal, if they'd like to come in and talk about some things, they have some questions before all of that happens. So it's our intent to deploy that on Monday the 7th, and we're asking parents to respond by the 16th. This is still, more than 5 weeks before we actually come back, but we feel without this data, as the superintendent said, our schools don't have the ability to plan or to begin to look at how classrooms will be changed or what will happen as we look at what things will fall or shake out as numbers wise.
Thanks, Tiffany. That's all we had to share. If anybody has any questions, we're happy to answer.
Go ahead, Christy.
Go ahead, Christy, then Sam.
So thanks so much, Superintendent. So right now, if any of the schools, were interested in this alternative reentry, then they just go through what's the best person for them to be working through with the school support, person.
Yeah,
and
their network director. Yeah.
Really, the conversation has to start at the school with the SIC, the SCC.
Yeah.
A plan has to be put together, and then they would submit that to, like if it's in the Highland network, it would be to Becky Pittum, and then Becky Pittum would be working with them and with you. Is that how that is going to fall out? Okay. All right. one of the things that I feel like I need to say is that, I am a little disappointed that, we moved the date back, to February. Understandably, it was a compromise, with all of us. But I think that one of the things I would like to see us talk about, since we talk about science-based, is the impact that 6 hours or more in front of the computer is having on our small children, on our younger children. And I think that I just keep hearing over and over again that that's what parents are talking to me about. They've committed to stay, into remote because that's where we're at. They're hoping, that the date was sooner as far as, the reentry. But I think that we have to, I would like for us to talk about that, and what kind of impacts that is for families and for kids. Because what I keep hearing is headaches, eye aches, changes in vision, especially in our elementary age kids, where they're in front of a screen for long lengths of time. And I don't know if any of other board members have been hearing about that, or if there's places that you can point us to, or resources, that we can talk about, with parents. Because if it were just a couple of parents I was hearing this from, then that would be different, but it's not. It's multiple parents that, I talk to, on walks or in the grocery store in my neighborhood, that's one of the concerns for their kids. The young adults, it's similar, but a little different. And, Amy touched on making sure that all of our mental health our mental health resources are on our front page. And then also on the school pages. I think we talked about this in our last meeting, that we really wanted to make sure that all of those clicks, were accessible at the school page. And that I think we even went as far as to say, is there a way for it to be on Canvas? So that, that there's automatic access, right there. So maybe that's something that, Sam could give us a report on, in regards to that. And the only other thing, and this is a little off base, but I want to couch it underneath the reentry. It has to do, Superintendent, with the information that we've just recently gotten from the governor about testing high school extracurricular activities. And you might not have a lot of information for us. Maybe this would be something that could come back, Nate and Melissa, for another meeting. But my understanding is that it is basically required that any high school student that participates in an extracurricular activity has to be tested. And my concern, and maybe the information we could get, and if you have any information, that'd be great, but the concern I'm having is who they're thinking is going to administer these tests at the school sites, and expecting our administrators, who are not medical personnel, to be administering a COVID test to high schoolers. So that's a concern to me. I'm just now reading the information. I saw some minutes from another meeting where Superintendent Dixon talked a little bit about it. So Nate and Melissa and Superintendent, maybe it's something for in the future, our next meeting, or maybe it's a memo that can come from you to, will you vet this out a little bit more for us and tell us what's really required? And I'm extremely concerned about looking at, what they're calling a volunteer staff to come in, and also requiring our administrators to take this test, to administer the test to our extracurricular activity high school students.
Yeah, this is all pretty fresh stuff. So let me round up some information, and I will send it out to you in a memo within a week here. Is that okay?
Thank you, Christy. Sam, you were next. Go ahead.
Thanks. So I just wanted to put on the table some things that I'm hearing from my constituents, which are, I think, similar to what Christy was saying. Maybe there's a desire that we just that we make sure we were presenting families with a range of information about different kinds of risks and different kinds of you know, giving people a wide variety of information to make their decision. And I'm sure you'll figure out how to do that. I'm curious. So Monday, the 7th of December is when the questionnaire goes out to parents, and then it closes on the 16th. Is that right?
Yeah.
What happens if somebody, you know, say that the Thanksgiving spike is not what causes you to freak out and decide that you don't want to send your kid back to school in person, but then it turns out that things get really bad at Christmas? When's the moment when a parent would need to, I mean, is there a moment of no return, or is there kind
Well,
of?
I feel like, you know, I feel like that's gonna happen, right?
Right.
I mean, there's going to be someone that makes a decision that they send in on the 7th or the 8th or whatever, and then they change their mind later on. I think we'll do what we always do, and that's try to work with them. I mean, I don't think we didn't really want to set a hard and fast, like, you must say this and you cannot change. I think most people will probably have a pretty good idea of what they would want to do in that time period. They'll speculate on what they think is going to happen, you know, as a result of the winter break. So, you know, the hope is, of course, that number is not enough to completely change things, but I think we can deal with that at a school level fairly easily.
And then how does that happen for teachers? Because I know that, and you know, I think the board has to kind of allow you all to do your jobs at the local level, but I would be curious to know what the timeline is for teachers in terms of when do they get asked, you know, when do they need to commit, and then, you know, I'm sure that the board, the current and the new board members, would want to have some of that information passed back to us just so we knew what was going on. And it might be really interesting for us to look at who was wanting to return among students, whose families were wanting to return, and not disaggregated by school and by all the demographic categories that we generally look at. I just think those would be useful pieces of information for us to have going into January and going into the January meeting.
Yeah. Well, I mean, again, so we're still gonna need that to figure out the teacher piece. We need to know the parent choice piece.
Okay.
And so that's why on the 16th, I mean, as soon as a school has it, I mean, it may not take till the 16th for some schools, but as soon as a school has a pretty strong perception of how it's going to go, and maybe they don't even need 100% response to start to figure out the details of that.
Mm-hmm. So I'm just curious when the board might know how accurate that SLEA survey was.
Oh,
probably sometime in January.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think January 5th that'll be the first board meeting, and I think we should have hopefully a lot of information at that time.
Okay, good.
That would leave us, I mean, we're 20 days from the proposed start at that point.
Right. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that I wanted to ask. Well, I guess I'll just say this because a lot of people have said this to me, and I'm sure it's something that we're all thinking about, but it would be good for us to know when schools submit their proposals for alternative reentry, just so that we're not unaware when we're talking to constituents.
Okay.
And so that we're, you know, because I think there's a lot of concern that it will be one part of the city that gets to reopen and not another, and that there's an obvious equity issue there that we want to be prepared for how it's actually unfolding versus our expectations, and you know, have opportunities to express our opinion about that along the way. But it probably doesn't sound like there's much information in that way at this point anyway. So
there's not, but I think that's again another thing that as soon as we have that information, I mean, I can send out a memo to you that says these schools are interested. Maybe they haven't gone through the whole process, but this is who's in the process, and you know, kind of keep you apprised of where they are.
I think that would be.
I think it's a great point. Thank you.
Thanks, Sam. Mike, did you have something you wanted to say?
Yeah, I just had a question of superintendent. Superintendent, what if one of the schools has everything together and puts it together for you, wants to start earlier? Is that possible?
That could happen. Yeah,
They could start in 1st of January if they got it all together.
I think that's a possibility.
Okay.
Catherine, go ahead.
And I think, you know what, I think what you said that that they could also delay the date if they wanted to, Larry, with the plans for the proposed dates. Is that correct?
Well, I think it's the point is just to allow some more flexibility. And again, well, we're going to learn more between now and the 25th. I mean, I don't know where that's going to take us. And, you know, it may take us to a place where a school may feel like, yeah, I'm ready to bring in the K1 on the 25th, but I think we have some justification or rationale that we would then wait 2 weeks to bring in the next group or whatever. I mean, I think we just want to leave it open. I think what we're
with
trying to do
consensus
is
building.
Yeah, trying to trust our administrators to,
Right.
they're the ones that know the communities the best. And we don't want, you know, I mean, I don't want independent decisions that are made just at the school. This has got to include the community. And I think
Sure.
that part is kind of fundamental to this. It's got to include parents.
I
And
do
we need,
want to respect Dr. Fehlberg's point that it puts our principals in a hard position. Basically, they're in the position that all of us are in, and that's hard for them. And I want to acknowledge that. And I also want to say respectfully that I think perhaps not you, Superintendent Madden, but district administrators have taken decision making latitude, as you were saying at the beginning, that we've given it to them. But I think rather they've taken it sometimes in ways that it was not intended to be given by the board. And I would like to say that I've been distressed by some of the reports I've heard across the district about how things have been discussed by district administrators, especially about teachers and how much flexibility they will have in their decision making about whether or not they will return. And so I guess I would call on SLEA to take an active role with that right now. I like this plan. I like a lot of things about this plan, and I appreciate the work that you and your administrators have done. At the same time, I don't necessarily see a clear pathway for decision making. I think we are creating plans without knowing the impact of Thanksgiving and winter holidays. We're creating a plan without December SIC and SEC meetings occurring at all times. And then we have to circle back and have them again. I think it calls almost for 2 sets of SEC and SIC meetings happening. Meeting with those people twice. I think if that would be a component of sort of a large idea of shared governance. And as I think I've said to some of you and individually, if we are a shared governance district as a large idea, then we should be a shared governance district about everything, and especially about our most important issues. If we are not a shared governance district about our most important things, then we're not a shared governance district. We can't be a shared governance district about our least important things. We have to be a shared governance district about our most important decisions. I'm very disappointed that we did not do a real survey of our parents or our teachers. There was clear direction by this board to do a real survey. There were suggestions of what kinds of questions should be on such a survey a month ago at our board meeting, and that neither of those surveys, a survey of the teachers and a survey of the parents, neither of those surveys happened. And I'm very disappointed that that didn't happen. It was very clear consensus and direction a month ago. I believe that many parents will not be able to make a decision until they know what their teachers will want to do. That some parents will choose to do what their teachers will be doing. Some parents will know that they want to stay remote or that they want to be in person. I respect both of those choices. But some parents will want to stay with their teachers, and I think that they will need to have that information. And so I think we need a way for the district to get consensus. I mean, what is the pathway to consensus for the recommendation? What is the way for the community to find that consensus, and what will consensus look like? So when I say that we need more definition for the pathway, that's why I wonder whether we do have enough time for a January 25th things. And I think that this will be discussion for the board that meets the first time in January to consider, do we have enough time to think about these things, and have SECs and SICs had enough time? And what do Utah's COVID numbers look like at that time? I really appreciate the fact that you said remote is our default option, that the school will maintain a high quality remote option, but not only that, that remote is the default option, and that the people that have been doing remote will not be now shuffled off to be the secondary option, and that now they will just be a side thought. And I think that I'd also like to mention that we cannot be doing a hybrid and be working, in two ways. And I think that's sometimes happening right now, unintentionally, with our small groups. And so I just want to remind people that our small groups are not intended to be a hybrid option. And in some cases, they are now becoming a hybrid situation. So we've got to be very careful that those those small groups are not becoming a hybrid situation. And if that's happening in classrooms, then we should be aware of that, and that should be mentioned to our principals. The last thing I want to say is that let's not forget about our preschools and other communities that sometimes get forgotten as we move forward these decisions. Let's make sure that we're being very inclusive as we think about all the stakeholders that have to think about this. I do realize that this is very difficult, and I know that people have been working very hard. I want to acknowledge that that our district leaders have been working very, very hard, and I want to express my appreciation to those leaders, and know that I do appreciate that, and I do want to say that I understand that this is difficult, and that all of us have been placed in a very difficult position this year as we've made decisions that perhaps other people should be making for us in this situation. And so thank you very much for what you've done. And I just would like to go forward saying that I appreciate what our principals are going to have to do, and I look forward to working with them in those in our district.
Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. Michelle or Nate, do you have questions? You want to weigh in?
I don't have any specific questions. I think they've already been covered by folks on the board that have spoken before me. Again, just a show of gratitude and appreciation to everybody. And I'm more or less, I think it's pretty obvious how I feel about this particular issue. Just based on my previous votes and the types of comments that I've made. And I'm still going to advocate, for teacher, for parent voice, and look forward to those surveys. But I also want to make sure that I continue to advocate for our other employees in the district. We have a lot of employees who aren't necessarily directly in the classroom, but have a lot of interaction with students. These are our paras, our bus drivers, our cafeteria and food service folks. I mean, a lot of folks that I'm talking about, are more or less feeling like they haven't had a lot of engagement or a lot of voice in this. And in many ways, when we talk about vulnerability, these are also some of our most vulnerable employees as well, relative to being uninsured or underinsured, based on the level of hours that they have with us. And I want to be very mindful of that. This is a large institution. I'm going to say ecosystem again. Melissa might smile about that, because her and I talk a lot about the health and the safety of the district as an ecosystem, right? And maybe that's just the macro level social worker in me, but we're only as strong as every individual part within the district. And if any one of those parts is to be unavailable or in a position where they can't be as effective as they normally are, then that only impacts the entirety of our system in not so great ways. So I would certainly continue to advocate for not only, outreach and engagement and, kind of a voice of reason and weighing in from folks outside of the teacher administrator realm in our district, and that we really focus on those classified employees who played just as equal of a role in educating our students and supporting that effort that we have. And then the last piece that I'll continue to advocate for with among my colleagues and with you, Superintendent Madden, and your cabinet is, continuing to work very hard on defining, safety. And I get that it's a moving target. I get that we have a lot, coming at us all the time relative to what we're learning, not only about this illness here locally, but just kind of national and worldwide trends and new information that's coming at us. And would still love to see this board, follow up on a recommendation from board member Sweat and student board member Dati Umin about, putting out a very solid statement about, how we as a community can get a hold of this virus, how we can collectively as a Salt Lake City community do our part to make sure that that we're doing everything we can as citizens to protect the most valued thing that we have in our community, which is our next generation, our students, the children in this community. And unfortunately, it's become a divisive issue. And I would really like to see that turn around to be one where our community can come together. I know that's exactly what I said from the get-go. The first decision that we made on this all the way back in July, that we need to rally around our kids. And as this virus continues to get worse, and I anticipate that it will, when we start seeing some trend data from not only Thanksgiving, but as we move into Christmas and New Year's and everything else, there's a lot of hard decisions that we still have and a lot more information that'll be coming at us. So I would certainly encourage us to continue to work with Yandri, Ms. Chatwin, about what that kind of collective statement or potentially a resolution could look like as we enter the new year.
Thank you.
Thanks, Nate. Michelle, oh, go ahead, Christy.
Thanks, Nate, for that public service announcement from Dottie, and I appreciate that. That was something I wanted to touch on, so you've already done that. I think that one of the things that I want to emphasize tonight as we try and wrap this conversation up is that I think it's really important that our community knows what our plans are. And the superintendent has tried to put forward the first part of that. I think that we need to continue to push to know what it looks like for our middle school and for our high school. And the reason that I feel that way is because I've already told you this, is that we're in the middle of open window today. It starts today. And, for us to think that our community is not going to be choosing other schools, is foolhardy. And so I think that it's important that we have those plans in place. And as Catherine talked a little bit about, that those plans may change. But when we all made this decision back in July, that was a part of what we said, is that we would continue, that we needed to have a reentry plan. We needed to have an in-person plan and also continue the remote plan. So here's our first steps, with elementary. Please don't, I just want us to not put any roadblocks up, that we need to continue to look at all aspects. And I thought everyone touched on all the different areas that we need the administration to look at, from para on up to administration, of how our parents and students and everyone's feeling. But now we need the superintendent to be able to start to put out other plans, of what it's going to look like for our middle school and then also for our high school, because otherwise our parents are going to believe that we're not going to ever talk about it. And I don't think that's the right way that we should handle this. I think that, given what the virus does, and we don't know, obviously the uncertainty is, as Nate has said, but that should not stop us from communicating with our community and letting them know that we're trying to move this forward as much as we possibly can within the realms and making sure that everyone's safe, as Nate pointed out. So I want to echo what everyone else has said. I appreciate all the work that's gone into this, but we need to keep pushing forward.
Thank you.
Thank you, Christy, and thank you everyone for your comments. I would just like to add my 2 cents that I really appreciate the work that's gone into this. I really appreciate the approach that will include the entire community. And as Nate likes to call it, the ecosystem. I think he's spot on in how to move forward. I really appreciate the parents of the students in Salt Lake City School District and the advocacy that they feel for their students, for their children. It's personal. And including them as partners and decision makers for their children is vitally important. I will also say I'm hearing a lot of concern, as is Christy, just about the mental health and even just physical health impact on students as they spend a lot of their day in front of a computer screen. I think it's important for us to address that. I think it's also important for us to be problem solvers and looking for solutions as a team, as we focus on the whole child, their education and their health, and including all the stakeholders and especially their parents in how we reach out to them. I appreciate the thoughtfulness of the superintendent and his team, as they really are trying to build a community of support for our Salt Lake City school children. They deserve the best. I feel really strongly that our children are deserve our best, and they deserve the best we can give them. And I appreciate the work that is going into this. So let's not stop. Let's continue moving forward. I think we need the superintendent's proposal of last meeting included looking at middle school and high school starting in the first meeting in January. So I will push for that. We've also talked about potentially having another study session similar to what we did with Dr. Hirsch, but this time with health professionals looking at things like mental health. We've had different people reach out offering their support on that front. And so if the board is willing to support that kind of a study session, I would love to get that set up in January sometime. And again, a huge thank you to everyone who's involved in the education of our children. And especially tonight, I'd like to thank parents for the work that they do in supporting their students every day. Thank you. Thank you, Superintendent. Oh, Mike, did you have a question or just a thumbs up? Sorry, it's hard for me to tell.
One more little thought. Can I give you another thought?
Yep, go ahead.
No, I think we need just to let each school community make their own decision on what they want to do. I think we need to just say, submit for approval to the superintendent, and then just let them go and check with their families and their friends and their teachers, and not have the board's influence at all in this procedure at all. It's just nothing to do with us. It has to do with the communities, and let them decide what they want to do. I know schools right now that have been working on it for months. I mean, they're ready to go. I think if we look back at what the superintendent's given us as far as their assignment completion is my heavens, their academic and it's just gone down the tubes. I've seen it in every school I've been in, and I don't care what anybody says. They say they're doing a great job and all that, but hey, the figures don't lie what he's given us. Just let the schools decide by themselves. Quit interfering in what they want to do and what the communities want to do. And I think the biggest influence comes in, on half of our teachers aren't even part of this union. And that's a big, they attempt to influence everything going on. It's just not right. Because this is not that type of a program. Just let the schools decide what they want to do and let the communities. That's all I got to say.
Can I say one more thing?
Oh, of course, Sam. One more thing, and then we'll move on.
I'll be brief, but I just want to say to Becky Pittum, I know you put a ton of work in, and we appreciate you leading this effort. And just know that we're here for you. I mean, I know we don't tend to generally communicate a lot between board members and network directors, but we're here for you, and we hear a lot from our communities about what they're thinking and the kinds of planning that they want to see. So even if you need to reach out to someone like me who voted against allowing this to happen, know that I'll just try to give you information and be a partner in that way to you. So I think we hear a lot of things from parents that they might not be sharing with principals and others at the school. So just know that we're there for you and we want to be a resource.
Thank you, Sam. And thank you, Superintendent. Anything you'd like to add in conclusion to this portion of our agenda?
I think we've got I got a lot of great notes, and I think I know where we're heading from here. So
Okay.
there's information to round up, and I think January 5th will be a good meeting.
Okay. Before we move on, let's let Dottie weigh in. Go ahead, Dottie.
Thank you. I was just going to say that teachers are really important to me. I wouldn't be sitting here if it weren't for my teachers. So I want to make sure that no matter what, teachers come out of this feeling that they didn't have a middleman, whether that be through administration or otherwise, but I want to make sure that they go straight from what they believe and that the board is held accountable for using those perspectives in our decision making. So that's all basically what I have to say. Something that I thought that we could possibly think about is pooled COVID testing. And kind of the concept behind that is like, for example, if we tested students in groups of 15, this is similar to what Red Cross does with blood. So they take like a sample of every bag of blood that they have, maybe 10 bags of blood. They take a sample, put them in a bowl, mix them all up, and then test them for any blood diseases, anything like that at one time. So that might be able to save us a lot of money if it works. The CDC has already issued guidance on how to report pooled COVID tests. And so I thought that might be a great way to kind of help out elementary schools. Yeah, that's it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dottie. Okay. Thank you. Thanks, board members, for your thoughtful questions and discussion. It's very much appreciated. Moving on to the third item on our discussion agenda item. This is a discussion about our board policy B1, communication and effective governance. And for this conversation, we've invited AJ Craybill to join us and facilitate this conversation as we discuss this and kind of set some framework and direction for the board as we move forward. I've also invited our incoming board members to join us for this conversation. We have Mohammed Baid, Joel Lee Organista, and Jenny Sika. I don't know if any of them are here yet, but as they come, we can add them to the conversation.
Joel Lee is here.
Okay, thank you. Welcome, Joel. We're excited to have you join us and soon to be a member of our board in January. Nate, I'm going to let you go ahead and introduce AJ as he facilitates this conversation for us.
Certainly, I'm happy to do so, President Ford. I just have the distinct honor to have met AJ, about 1.5 years ago at this point. When I was a brand new board member, I was invited to a NALEO conference, which is the National Association of Elected and Appointed Latino officials. And so, AJ was there talking about school governance. And I was very compelled about his presentation that he gave alongside San Antonio ISD, who's seen a lot of really tremendous work in their turnaround efforts on a district-wide level. When I had the opportunity to not only join the board, but have the experience of being on leadership as vice president, Melissa and I have put together a lot of initiatives and conversations about how we can manage the work of the board in the most effective way possible, even more effective than what we're typically used to. And, I really thought that AJ could bring a lot to the conversation. He's had the chance to meet with all of us board members at one point or another over the last 6 months or so. And I believe, and of course, our new board members, I believe he talked with every single one of our new board members who will be joining us in January. And I really think AJ has a lot to offer to our board, to our community. And I'm really looking forward to his facilitation tonight. I'll turn the time over to AJ at this point.
Good evening, and thank you for having me. Board members, current, incoming, as well as administrators. The first step in the conversation is writing. So if you could get something to write with, pencil, paper, I'm going to ask you to write a few things during our time together. The first thing that I want you to write down, and don't write anything yet, but I just want you to think about it. That right now, you are in a position of leadership in the school system. That's why you're part of this call this evening. But at some point in the future, I don't want you to write anything yet, just be thinking. At some point in the future, your time in leadership will come to a conclusion. When you are at that point in the future, with your time in leadership having completed, and you were looking back, begin to imagine, what is it that you most want to have accomplished? What difference do you most want to have made in the time that you've been given? And so just take a moment to reflect on, when my time in leadership has come to an end, what is it that I will be most proud of having accomplished? What is it that I'll be most excited of having done with the time that I've served? What difference, what lasting impact do I most want to have had? And now that you've had a moment to reflect on this, my question is this: in 10 words or less, what difference do you want to make for students? At some point in the future, your time in leadership will be over. And as you reflect back on your time in leadership and identify the thing that you're most proud of having accomplished, the thing that you most hope to have accomplished has come to pass. What is that thing? In 10 words or less, what do you most hope to accomplish for students? I see some of you are still writing, but some of you have already finished. Who will be the first to share? What are your 10 words or less? What difference do you most want to have made? Yeah, Michelle?
All students are empowered to have their voices heard.
All students are empowered to have their voices heard. Why is that important to you?
Coming from the precinct that I'm in, a lot of my students and their families do not feel like their voices are heard. So my hope is that being on the board has helped them to understand that what they have to say is important.
Thank you. Who will be the next to share? What are your 10 words or less?
Sure. So I said that we demonstrate as adults that we're willing to rethink the status quo. And I think my time in leadership is coming to an end. And one of the things that I'm really proud of that we did while I was on the board was to get our late start initiative passed for 2021. But that's just one example, I think, of how adults need to be willing to partner with students and kids and say, look, we get that the status quo doesn't work for all of you very well, and we're gonna change it if we need to and where we need to.
Thank you. Who will be the next to share? Just go ahead, go for it.
Every single student achieves their goals for the best education possible.
Every single student achieves their goals for the best education possible. Why is that important to you?
I want every single student to feel that they matter and that their education is important, that they can continue to be lifelong learners.
Thank you. Who'll be the next to share?
Well, so mine is provide access and opportunity for all students. And I think that the reason I feel that way is there shouldn't be any student in our district that doesn't have opportunity and access to be successful. There shouldn't be any program, there shouldn't be any class, there shouldn't be any goal that they want to attain, that there should be a roadblock for them, that we should have opportunity and access for all.
Thank you.
I'll go next. So I wrote down creating equitable practice to close the achievement gap. Anything's possible. And I personally, that's my charge. My whole mission on wanting to run and serve in this capacity was to make sure that there was equitable opportunity for students to achieve and know that they can do anything that they want to, right? And I speak to that just from personal experience as a student in this school district when I was going through it. Could have easily given up on me, and I could have easily given up on the system as well and chosen a different path. But this district, stood behind me, and I know that foundation exists and that we can grow upon that foundation.
I'm happy to share next. I put all make progress towards the whole person they will become. And I wrote that because I think the students are multidimensional, and they have social, emotional, and educational and extracurricular and other aspects. And I want to see them make a progress towards their whole selves and to be well-rounded, successful, happy adults that are able to cope in all aspects of their lives as grown-ups and as young adults after they leave our district.
Thank you. Who will be the next to share?
I'll go. So this is Huele. Mine is youth having healthy, transformative learning experiences. And for me, the reason is, as a student that went to this school district, I remembered those transformative experiences that were helpful and healthy. And then when I taught Horizonte, I tried to have as many of those transformative experiences with my students, because that's when the students can actually take charge of their life. And that's what I've done, right? So yeah, hopefully that's transformative experiences through pedagogy and best practices is what we can strive for.
Thank you. Mohammed Dari, who's up?
Oh, hi everyone. If I were to sit down with a student right now, the one thing I would tell the student is this school would not be present if it was not for you. And the reason I go for this is because, it's the reality. If we do not have students, schools would not be present, would not be there. And without, students, then teachers would not be there. And so it is a chain reaction that actually holds the school together. So those students need to understand that when they are in there, we are there for them to make sure that we are giving them everything that is possible within our power to prepare them to build their foundation so that they can embrace the outside world once they are out there on their own.
Anyone else?
I guess I can go. Mine would be to shatter ceilings and to make room for other young voices.
Why is that important to you?
I think for a lot of places, youth are not offered a seat at the table, and I want it to be my mission to drag a chair to that table and to make room for students like me. And, wherever I end up, I'll make sure that I'm able to do that for every generation ahead of me.
Thank you. Larry, what you got for us? Alan, you want to jump in here?
I want all students to feel empowered academically and socially. And the reason is I believe every student brings something positive to this, and that when we empower students academically and socially, we have the opportunity to change the system so that it works better for everyone, because it works well for some, but not well for all. We need it to work well for everyone.
Mike, Alan, anybody else jumping in here?
Right, so I wrote down, allocate resources in ways which best serve students. As part of my job, I'm not in the classroom, I'm not interacting one-on-one with the students, but what I can help guide is where do we have our resources, and is it in the best place for them?
Anyone else before we transition? What did you notice as you were listening to all of your colleagues share their 10 words or less? What jumped out at you? What'd you notice?
Everything was about students.
Focus on students.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of crazy. It's a school board. Why do you keep talking about students? Yeah, it's difficult to miss the consistency with which comment after comment after comment is focused on what it is that you want for students. What are your aspirations for students over and over and over again? Why do you think that is? Why is that? Why did everybody share different perspectives on the exact same conversation?
For me, when I think about it, it's because that's why I decided to run, is I wanted to make sure that the experience that my children had in public education, that for future generations, that it just got better and better, that the experience would continue to get better and better, and the district would continue to be better and better. So for me, that was the genesis of why I ran, was because I cared about the students of our city and the education that they were receiving.
Well, that's why you answered the way you did, but that really my question is, why is it, Christy, that everyone else answered roughly the same way you did?
And I think that, to tell you honestly, AJ, I think that that's the genesis for all of us, that we care. I mean, I've listened to Sam and to Nate's stories and Joel's story about, growing up in this district and how important it is. And so even as me as a mom that has kids, and yet, Sam with no children, that was important to him. And so it's the foundation for all of us, I think. And it comes across that way in the things that we talk about. So.
Anyone else? Why do you think everybody else had comments that were so similar?
It just shows, one, we understand why we are elected for this position. And two, it's our passion. Otherwise, we would not be sitting here. As a father, as an immigrant, I appreciate very much the importance of education. And it is very humbling to look at my kids, and seeing them earning education better than what I had. And so the reason also we are answering all of us like this, because I'm sure every one of you here share the same passion, which is these are the future of this country. They are not just, bodies in the classroom. They are not just children of families in the classroom. these are the people who will one day take on that torch and move on with it. Those are the people who will actually continue to build on the American dream. Those are the kids who will actually continue on to show that you can come to this country. You may be the first in your family's generation to ever attend school, but when you come here, know that there are so many resources out there to help you become who you want to become. And that's my vision on it.
Yeah. On your paper, I want you to write 3 words: inputs, outputs, outcomes. Inputs, outputs, outcomes. When I think about inputs, I think about things at the beginning of a cycle. These are the strategies, these are the resources applied. And so I was working with one board and it said, oh, well, we should have, our focus should be on having more AP seats for students of color. I think of this as an input. That is something that is defined at the beginning of the cycle, and it's a description of the resources applied. It's an important input, but it's a horrible thing for a board to say, this is what we're going to be focused on. Why is that? Why would you not want the board to be solely focused on how many seats are made available for students of color in an AP course? Why would you not want that to be the focus? What's it missing?
The outcome?
It tells you the input, but it doesn't actually tell you if students, it says we set aside extra seats with the intention of having students of color in them in our AP courses, but does it actually tell you whether or not students showed up? No. For that, we need the next layer, outputs. So where the inputs are the resources and strategies applied at the beginning, the outputs are the measures of implementation in the middle. And so I had the same boards like, all right, AJ, we got you. We don't want to be focused on the input, how many seats are made available. We want to be focused on how many students of color actually sat in those AP seats. Is that what the board wanted to be focused on? The answer is no. Why not? What's still missing?
We want to know how many kids sat in those seats and how many of them were successful.
We want to know how many were successful. That brings us to the idea of outcomes. Whereas inputs are resources and strategies applied at the beginning of the cycle, and where outputs are measures of progress in the midst of the cycle, outcomes are measures of results at the end of the cycle. Which one of those does the school board, and this was an actual school board, by the way, I don't make up any of my stories. I just hide the names to protect the guilty. So this board started off thinking that they wanted to focus on that their number one goal was going to be how many additional seats were added to AP courses. And then they moved on to, okay, that's not actually what we want. We want to focus on how many students of color are actually sitting in these seats in AP courses. And then they moved on to that and said, no, what we actually want in our community is we want to focus on how many students of color are joining AP courses, or being given equitable access to that opportunity, and are actually being set up for success, or actually succeeding in that. Why is this an important story? What's the important takeaway here?
I can share. So 10 years ago, I graduated from West High School. We didn't have a reunion because of the pandemic, unfortunately. But so we, back then, I did the IB program, and I wrote my senior extended essay on the achievement gap between the Latinos and white students at West High. And this is what I was mentioning, which was these are the strategies that I think as a student, West High should do. And then I put out in clear data that I was the only Latino in the whole program when West High School was 40% Latino. And this, you could replace the AP conversation you just mentioned with IB at West High School. 10 years later, is there a difference? Are there more Latinos at West High School doing IB? Boy, yeah, there's more than one because there was only one. And the difference is the outcomes. How many of them tried to start it and weren't successful? That's what you're talking about, the outcomes. We can have more people in the IB program at West that are Latino, but how of them are successful? Is it just one person every year when there's more than 40% of the Latino population at West, right? So I think you're very right in terms of focusing on outcomes that inform our inputs, right, our strategies, but that is not the focus. And of course, the outputs is not the focus either. Just saying, oh, there are numbers, there are Latinos, but it's actually how many drop out the senior year of IB, and how many are not continuing it.
Why is it important for a board to be focused on the outcomes of students rather than the inputs of adults and all? Because we're not suggesting that the inputs and the outputs aren't important. Why is it, however, that I'm suggesting that boards absolutely have to be focused on what are the outcomes for our students? Why is that?
It's the result. I mean, it's the result of the work. It's the result of the work that we do as adults with children. And if we don't ever get to that outcome, like Joely says, I mean, it's not their responsibility to make sure that they go through. I mean, the thing is, we can't just get lost in what we're going to teach is responsibility, right? No, to me, that's not okay. We have to take the responsibility to grab hold of that individual, find out what they need, what they've got, and get them to that outcome point.
Why, anyone else? Why is it important for school boards to be focused on the outcomes of their students?
I think it sets the tone, right? It plants the goalpost. At the end of a school year or any other designated period of time, that empowers folks within the district, including our students, our teachers, administrators, to have something to strive for, right? It's okay. We know what our expectation is. The outcome that the leaders of this community and this district are looking for is this, and how are we going to do that? Is the next question.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking about specifically goals that we've recently set over the past couple of years, where we decided that we'd be looking at reading and social and emotional. And the reason we landed on that was because of the outcomes around reading, around literacy. So the way I look at this is your outcomes help you determine your goals also. What is going to be that next step. So if you don't have that, then you never move. You're just staying in one place. So you need to look at those outcomes to keep moving forward.
Yeah, the outcomes for your students are your why. There's a lot of other stuff that is the how, and that's important. But the how isn't important for its own sake. It's important because of its contribution to the why. And if a board doesn't know what the why is, then frankly, as a board, you can't really do much good. Not for students, for yourselves, certainly. But for students, not so much. Anyone else? Why is it important for a board to have a focus on the outcomes of the students? Anyone else? Yes.
Sorry, I think there's a little feedback somewhere, but I was just going to say, this is making me think of a moment about a year ago when we got a bunch of data from our excellent folks in teaching and learning about the literacy goal. And it was a moment where I said to myself, oh, wow, this is a tremendous amount of work, both in terms of the work that had gone into teaching kids to read, but also in terms of just measuring it. And I realized that I was I was quite uninformed about what that information actually meant. I mean, I could look at it and see the different colors that were there to sort kids into different levels of reading comprehension, but there was a lot I didn't know about the assessments that we were using and that the state uses. And I think that's something that I would love to recommend that the new board, and there are people on this board that I'm sure know a lot more about those things than I do, but I think if I had it to do over again, I would sit down with Tiffany Hall and Dr. Amio and say, please give me, a crash course in everything I should know about how we're measuring this literacy goal, because I do think it's important that we pay attention to the anecdotal data about what parents and educators and kids themselves. I mean, hopefully we're hearing from kids themselves, but what they tell us about how they're learning to read and what they're learning to read and how that's serving them as they traverse through their education. But if we're going to measure it, and we absolutely should measure it, board members need to have a grasp of those tools, both so that we can know what the progress is and so that we can know if we're using the right tools to measure it.
Sorry, yeah, go for it.
Well, I would just say that outcome is the only thing that matters. That's really the only thing that makes a direct difference for students. So I think staying focused on the outcome means that we'll lead towards achieving that outcome, which creates the most direct difference.
Yeah, I would say the exact same thing you just said. The way I often say it when speaking is that schools exist to improve student outcomes. That is the only reason why school systems exist. There's a lot of other things that school systems do, but their reason for existing is to be transformative in the lives of students in the terms of what students know and are able to do. That school systems exist for one reason only, to improve outcomes for students. That's why school systems exist. Everything else is a how we get there, and all those things are important, but those aren't the why. The why is student outcomes, and school systems exist to improve student outcomes. So part of the challenge that boards face is when you lack focus on a clear, coherent why, the most likely thing I've observed across the country is your behavior goes in all manner of ridiculous directions, none of which wind up being particularly valuable to the students that you've been sworn to serve. And it is this reality, the general lack of focus on a clear set of these are the outcomes that we want to invest our time in as a board, I think is the number one reason that gives rise to my visiting with you this evening. That we will be able to talk through your various policies, we'll be able to talk through your procedures, and we'll be able to tune those up and get those working the way you want them to. But absent a clear focus on the outcomes of your students that you all as a team collectively say are most important to be focused on, none of that will actually help elevate you from where you've been to where you're trying to go. Case in point, as you think about the student outcomes that the board says are most important, which ones have you all adopted? What are the student outcomes that you, board, have adopted and said, these are the most important things? Anybody? Pop quiz. What student outcomes has the board adopted and said, these are the most important student outcomes that we need to be focused on?
Certainly. So I think that the most tangible one that we have is literacy, right? And in increasing literacy across the district by 5% on an annual basis is the way I understood that. And then, and not to minimize the importance of social and emotional learning, I don't know if there's any real specific way that we measure, how that outcome exists or how that outcome improves itself over time. And again, I'm not minimizing any of the work of folks on our administrative team, but that is potentially our fault, right? For not setting that clear goal or that clear outcome, for our experts in the system to be able to work effectively around that.
When did the board adopt this as a student outcome they wanted to focus on? When did that happen?
I think it's been about 2.5 years, 3 years. Yeah, between 2.5 and 3 years ago.
Is that most people's recollection? Is that what most people are thinking? This would mean yes, this would mean no. Okay, got it. So the question of focus for a school board in large part comes down to how did the board choose to spend its time? So let's run the numbers. During the month of November, I want you to write down the percentage of time in board meetings that was focused on monitoring progress relative to this student outcome that the board has said is the most important thing to focus on. So, write down a number between 0 and 100 that describes the amount of time during the month of November that this board spent focused on monitoring progress, actually receiving data that helped you understand the extent to which student outcomes, student performance had improved in this area that the board has adopted as a student outcome that's most important to focus on. Write down a number between 0 and 100 that describes the percentage of the board's time during board meetings in the month of November that was invested into monitoring progress, where the board actually received data that said, here is where our students are, here's where we're trying to get to, and here's how we're bridging that gap. Once you've written down that percentage, write down the percentage for the month of October. What percentage of the board's time during the month of October was invested in monitoring progress toward the student outcome that the board has adopted as being the most important to be focused on? You'll write a number between 0 and 100 that describes the percentage of the board's time during board meetings in the month of October that were invested in receiving data that describes where were our students, where are they going, and where are we at right now? What percentage of the board's time in October was focused on the student outcome that the board has adopted as being the most important one to be focused on? Then do the same thing for September, August, July. When you're done, you should have 5 numbers, all of them between 0 and 100, describing the percentage of time during board meetings that the board invested into monitoring progress relative to the outcome for students that the board has adopted as saying is the most important to be focused on. Then once you have those 5 numbers, add them together and divide by 5. For some of you, the math will be easy. Add those 5 numbers together, divide them by 5. And this gives us an average of how much time are we spending focused on the outcomes of our students that the board has adopted as saying are the most important things to be focused on over the past 5 months. Who will be the first to share? What number do you have? What is your percentage average?
I got about 20.
20, got it. Who else?
But I guess I would also say that I think this sort of points to a point Nate was making about, social.
Hold on a second. We'll come to that point as well. Don't worry. There's more points to be made here. But first, who else? What was your number?
So I'll go next. Mine was 0.
Got it. Who else? What was your number?
Mine was also 0.
Got it. Who else?
Mine was 0.
Got it. Who else?
15.
Got it. Thank you. Who else?
10 for me.
10. Got it. Who else?
Like 5.
You said, was that 5 or 0.5?
5.
5. Got it. Anybody else? What was your number? Anybody we haven't heard from, what was your number?
0.
Alan, it was hard for you to count that high. I know you
I had to use
struggled.
my 10 key for that one.
Had to break out that calculator, Alan. Thank you for that. Putting in that hard work tonight. As you reflect on the 10 words or less that you came up with, and you reflect on the number that you just wrote down, your 5-month average, what are you noticing? As you reflect on the 10 words or less that you wrote, and you reflect on the final number that you just wrote down, what are you noticing?
Well, I think, Mr. Crable, that sometimes you
Just
have
AJ.
to deal with the emergency in front of you. And I think that that's what we're noticing, is that sometimes there's a different emergency in front of you, and that takes precedence. And so I think that if you were talking about a different year, if we were looking at a different year, that number would be vastly different. I mean, in last year, we spent a great deal of time talking about literacy. This year, we've spent a great deal of time talking about COVID. And so I think that you have to account for that, and that has to be taken into account. And I think it's very significant that we have retasked to the very important issues at hand. And while we have talked a little bit about literacy, and we've dealt with things like diversify our narrative, and we've focused on things like that, we have had very important issues brought to task for us, and that we've had to deal with that. So I think that we have to acknowledge that as a team and work with that for ourselves, as well as the fact that we need to think about literacy. We have asked for reports from our employees. We've asked for updates on our student scores, but we have to look at what we have in front of us and look at what we need to do for our students and our teachers and our employees.
The only modification I'd add to that is you all don't actually have to do much of anything. You all can choose to, and what you all choose, you're the elected officials. It's your job to choose what are the priorities to be focused on. And so I completely agree with you that you all can choose to focus on this thing or that thing. I work with enough boards across the country to know that some boards made the same choice you all made, and some boards made radically different choices. And so each board does have the authority to make that choice. And what I invite you to reflect on is just the nature of what are the choices we've made, and to what extent are they getting us what we want. And if they're working, then keep choosing that. If you have any discomfort with whether or not they're working, then all we're doing now is just reflecting on what are additional options for the future. Who
AJ,
else?
I would like to add into that.
Yeah, as you reflect on your 10 words or less and the number you wrote down, what are you noticing?
So for me, what I'm noticing is that the focus was taken away, because really what your question was, what I'm hearing you say, is we set this goal and we care about this goal, but yet how many times have we actually talked about it? And in my perspective, it's 0, because you said, how many times did you look at it deeply? Did you talk about it? Did you disseminate it? And everyone's right that, yes, we have, the pandemic in front of us, but we've also, and you're absolutely right, we've chosen, the things that are on our agenda to talk about. And to a certain extent, that has gone to the wayside. So shame on us. Because to tell you honest, I mean, from my perspective, those 10 words, my focus on students, that literacy right now is at such a high risk during this pandemic that we should have been focused on what's been going on with literacy, K through 12, with all of our students. And since you've put it that way, and I've looked at it that way, it's a little bit of a lost time, lost opportunity that we should have taken. And
as you all reflecting on this is reflection. The same way that we want our teachers to engage in reflective practice, we want our principals, we certainly want Alan and Larry here to spend some time in reflection from time to time. In the same way, as a board, we come together on occasion, we reflect, and we just, not for the purpose of castigating what's come before, but the purpose of being visionary about what comes next. Who will be the next to share? As you reflect on the 10 words or less that you wrote and the number you wrote down, what are you noticing? Who will be the next to share?
Well, I think it's interesting because it brings up the question of, these two goals, which I think are both good goals, but they're not goals that we all set together at this point. And, the issue of literacy, I was a little more generous, I guess, with my interpretation.
You were very generous. That's very kind of you.
And, because we did talk about, there were moments where literacy certainly came up. There was
the word literacy was used the last 5 months. I'll let the cat out of the bag. I went back and reviewed your meetings. I did not see any example of you all reviewing student performance data relative to literacy that looked at the extent to which student performance today had made shifts between where you had set it and where you intended to go. I did not see evidence of that over the last 5 months.
Well, there was a moment we looked at I think it was Dibble's data from middle of the year last year, but right before we were dismissed in March. And then
yeah, I'm just talking about the last 5 months.
But this was, so I guess what I'm saying is, I think we looked at that, and I think we all feel the urgency, knowing that there is great data and research about what does it mean, for kids of different ages and in different demographic groups to learn to read, and that we knew that this was going to be a major part of how we needed to be thinking vis-a-vis the pandemic. But I don't know that we dug into that in the way that we should have. I think part of the challenge is that, in Utah, we're in a system that's already way over tested, right? And so it's sort of a question of like I was saying before, I think we need to be better educated in how we look at the numbers we're already taking, although there are holes in that because of what happened in March. But we also maybe need to think about, what do we mean? Does it always have to be measured? Is what other kinds of information are we willing to look at, or do we want to look at?
So it definitely has to be measured. That's a non-negotiable. However, the point you lift up though is, are there other ways that it could be measured that we think would reveal data that we are more prepared to rely on? Or are there other goals entirely other than this one that as a board, we think we should be focused on instead of these ones? Like I think those are fabulous conversations to have, because then it again has you in this place of being visionary. So the point of this conversation isn't you pick the perfect goal. The point is that's the one you've got. Run with it until such time as you decide that maybe there needs to be something else. And maybe that's the next conversation to have is, did we pick the right one and did we pick the right measure? Because there's a lot of different ways to measure that. You can rely on state data, you cannot rely on state data. You can rely on proctored data, you can rely on directly assessed data. I mean, there's all manner of ways that you could go about it. And that would be a great conversation to have. And part of the reflection is you also didn't have that potentially transformative conversation in the last 5 months either. Got it. Who else? As you're reflecting on your 10 words or less and the number you wrote down, what are you noticing? And hopefully as you all are listening to the conversation, you're starting to hear opportunities for action for the board to step in more fully into what's possible for you as a governing team on behalf of the students you serve. I'm hoping that you're hearing the call to what's possible in your leadership as a team. Who will be the next to share? As you Michelle, go for it. As you reflect on your 10 words or less and the number you wrote down, what did you notice?
So, my 10 words was about student voices. And then I put a 0. And this is something I've been reflecting on as I've been coming to the end of my time here. There's been a lot of conversations, but we're not coming out of it with a lot of action items.
Yeah.
And that kind of troubled me a little bit because, we spent time in July talking about what are our goals for the year, what is it we want to accomplish? And so we've had people that have come in and talked about different things. So they've talked about, you know, the school resource officers and that, you know, school to prison pipeline, but we didn't really come up with like, what is our action plan? What are our next steps?
Yeah.
You know, last week, Dr. Hall gave an amazing presentation about literacy and diverse literacy. So diversify our narrative, which is actually an initiative that students came up with, and students came and talked to us about, you know, they emailed us about it. And so we wanted to hear more about what the school district could do to accomplish that goal. But again, it was just this conversation of, wow, this is really great. And we really need to, you know, put in more or have more diverse authors within our school systems, within our literature, you know, language arts and history and, you know, science. But again, there was never that. So what are our action plans? You know, so we're going to take this information and we're going to do what with it? And so I think that's been the weakness that I've seen.
Yeah, this is the power of reflection, is that it begins to open up opportunities for action going forward that maybe I hadn't fully noticed because I didn't stop to be reflective. This is why we stop to be reflective in our practice. One more before we transition. As you reflect on your 10 words or less and the number you wrote down, what are you noticing? One more before we transition. Who wants it? All right, well, since you made the mistake of being the board chair, I'll pick on you.
Thanks, AJ. My 10 words were about every student having access. And I actually feel like that is largely what our conversations are about. Takes the form of you know, how we're addressing issues through COVID, how we're meeting the needs of students. But I do feel like we're talking about that. I guess I was with Sam and I wasn't as generous maybe as Sam, but it's still pretty low. But I do think that I think that we're trying to focus on what we need to focus. And I focus on, and I think being reflective is really important. And I hope that we can take the time to do that. I think in the way things are coming at us so fast right now with this year, it feels like we've dealt with a lot of different things, that it is still important to take a few minutes to sit, not minutes, the time it requires to be reflective about where we want to go from here. I think we do take some time talking about inputs. We do take some time talking about outputs. We should spend more time talking about the outcomes. And I think that it's an opportunity with the new board members and an interim superintendent, a new business administrator, for us to really set the tone moving forward as we work together to focus on those student outcomes.
Yeah. What I want you to write next on your paper, I want you to become more powerful than your excuses, more powerful than all your reasons, whatever other stories that you try to tell. Set all that aside. Really reflect. And on paper, in 10 words or less, answer this question. What is something in my communication that's made it harder for this board to be focused on student outcomes? What is, and this is for every single one of you. So the new board members that are going, oh, I'm brand new. Nope, this is for you too. Staff, you know this is for you. Board members, this is definitely for you. Student board member, this is for you. In 10 words or less, what is something about my communication that has made it harder for the board to be focused on student outcomes? Take a moment to reflect. This is an opportunity for brutal honesty, for being absolutely transparent with oneself, and being mindful about what are the things in my behavior particularly over the last 5 months, that may have made it harder for the board to be focused on the things that we say matter most? As I replay the video of my leadership over the last 5 months, what's something I'm noticing that as I reflect now, I probably didn't intend it then, it wasn't my intention, but as I begin to be reflective in my practice over the last 5 months, what's something I'm noticing in my communication, how I communicated, when I did or when I didn't, the tone, the manner, the methodology, what's something that exists in my communication in the last 5 months that may have made it harder for the school board to be focused on student outcomes? In 10 words or less. You don't have to share. I'm not going to call on anyone. But is there someone who will be the first to share? What were your 10 words or less? What's something you've noticed? Something I've noticed in my behavior in the last 5 months. As I really rewind and reflect on my practice, I noticed this is an area of my communication that may have made it harder for the board to be focused on student outcomes. Who will be the first to share?
I'm going to share this one as an observant.
So what
yes.
what in your behavior, what in your communication has made it harder for the board to be focused on student outcomes?
Yeah, okay. Reacting to constituents' need and not working as one body. So
is this true for you?
This is.
Is this true for you?
Not for me here.
Yeah, set that aside. That's not what I'm interested in.
Okay, so you're talking for me,
yes,
for example, outside of the board.
No, I'm talking about what in your behavior in the last 5 months, what in the way you've communicated or how you communicated or when you have or haven't communicated has made it harder for the school board to be focused on student outcomes. So sit with that, think on it a little bit, and we'll come back. Cheat code, this, your 10 words or less are probably an I statement.
I gotta give an example, especially as someone that's not on the board.
Yeah.
So I have not been proactive to talk to people I should talk to.
Yeah, no, this is really straightforward. It doesn't have to be anything complicated. I love that as an example. It's like, as I begin to really replay, I realized that if I had communicated with people that I really needed to communicate with about these things, then that might have actually inspired the board to be more focused on these things. Like, I could have had an impact, and as I replay the video of my leadership, I noticed that I missed that opportunity. And this doesn't make me a good person, bad person. It's not about that. It's about, as I reflect, I begin to notice opportunities for action to be the transformative leader on behalf of students that I want to be. Thank you for being the first to share. Always takes courage to go first. Appreciate that. Who will be the next to share? What's something in 10 words or less, something in my communication in the last 5 months that may have made it harder for the board to be focused on student outcomes?
Sure. I feel like I have reacted out of anger and out of loyalty.
Yeah, as I begin to replay the video of my leadership, just like a coach replays the video after the game, right? They go back and they watch the game film. As I begin to notice that there are times, this isn't who I am all the time, and it's, but there are moments in the last 5 months when I realized, you know what? If I'm being honest with myself, I reacted out of, moments where I acted out of anger or maybe loyalty, rather than really in ways that communication may have made it harder for the board to be focused on student outcomes. I absolutely love that. It's a powerful moment in the life of a leader to get clear about the behaviors in my own life that have been impeding my focus and the focus of my team. That's where power for leaders really comes from. It is we begin to get real with ourselves. And inside of that, begin to make new choices that give rise to a new future for our students. Who will be the next to share? What were your 10 words or less?
I'll go ahead and go. And I had a hard time wrapping this up into 10 words, so I have less than 10 words, AJ, but I've been too careful.
I've been what?
too careful.
I've been too careful. I don't understand. What do you mean by that?
Relative to how I communicate, what I'm communicating, my tone, really just, and I think in many ways I have taken a stand on a lot of issues, but I think I've been too careful to try to be, more of a diplomat versus a representative.
I've been more of a diplomat versus a representative. Got it. I'm going to push on anybody whose name's been in the paper recently to make sure that you're being reflective on those circumstances as well. But in addition to those, this idea that there are times when I really needed to step forward and represent, and I chose to be careful and be more of a diplomat than my spirit was leading me to do. I get that. Certainly when I served on my school board, I can reflect on moments where I'd have to admit that was true for me as well. Who will be the next to share?
AJ, let me hop in right here. I want to hear what Christy has to say. Sorry, I didn't mean to jump in, but we've spent an hour with you, and which is what we've allotted. And I know the board would like to continue the conversation, but I want to make sure we're also sensitive to the other things we have on our agenda. So let me just, maybe ask us to continue to be reflective, and then AJ, for you to kind of move through what we need to wrap up so that we can move forward. And I will say, for my reflection, I think I've had, lots of opportunities in leadership positions to try and be as communicative as possible with all board members. But I think that in self-reflection, I think I've fallen short in some cases in terms of passing along information maybe as quickly as I could, or as, I don't know. I just think I think that in trying to balance what I'm trying to meet the needs of every board member, that I just want everybody to be happy, basically. And I am finding that that's really hard to do. And I haven't really been able to live up to that standard that I set for myself as well as I would like. That's way more than 10. So I'm sorry for that.
Thank you. Is there anyone else before we transition? Yeah, Christy.
So I guess what my words would be is that because of my trust issues with my fellow colleagues, I've chosen to not have conversations with them.
Yeah. Who does that serve?
No one.
Oh, no, it serves somebody. Who does that serve?
Well, it serves me
Yeah.
to a certain extent, because then I don't, well.
Yeah. It's comfortable. It's more comfortable.
And to a certain extent it's comfortable, but yet it keeps me up at nights. I mean.
There's a cost to it. Yeah, no doubt.
I don't sleep because it's a constant worry for me.
This is part of the challenge that as board members we have to confront, is that there are going to be moments when the work is highly uncomfortable. And a temptation that I've certainly experienced myself is to kind of withdraw and retract. And the thing to be super clear about in this conversation is that is incredibly beneficial to me at the cost of what's possible for my students. It really is. You really reflect on these moments over the last 5 months, begin to notice the benefit to self, the cost to students. Yeah. Yeah, Catherine?
And I just wrote that the things that I've done is very similar to Christy, that sometimes I need to reach out to more people and have discussions with a variety of people.
Yeah, absolutely. So we started our time together with talking about why do school systems exist? Like what's the difference I want to make? And the overwhelming conversation was I want to make a difference in the lives of students. Like I want great things for them. There's permeate variations on that all of these shared. And then we talked about why it's so valuable for a board to be focused on student outcomes. And then we talked about the extent to which the board has or hasn't been focused on student outcomes over the last 5 months. And then we began to recognize that communication failures are a symptom of something larger, and that what they're causing is absolutely destructive to our chances to create student outcomes. What I want you to do as a follow-up to our conversation this evening is, to the extent that you want to continue this conversation, to the extent that you want to actually put in place a plan for creating a quality of communication that actually allows you to serve your students in the way you intend, and to the extent that you want to put together a plan that gets you to the point where the next time somebody shows up in your meeting and asks you what percentage of your time is actually focused on student outcomes, you all give answers that don't involve kind of hanging your head a little bit low as you share your number. If you want to create a plan for how you take back your own service and be the leader that you want to be, and a plan for how you take back your own board meetings and be the governing body that you want to be, my request is start by just sending me an email or calling me, texting me, however you want to reach out, and let me know what you want to see happen next. And if I wind up hearing that from the majority of you, I'll reach back out to, between now and Friday, I'll reach back out to your officers and suggest a plan forward that we can engage in. If I don't hear that from you all, I have plenty of other things to do with my time. But if you see this as an opportunity to do something more powerful for students going forward than has described your individual and collective impact over the last 5 months, my request is just reach out to me. Shoot me an email, phone call, text message. Let me know what's on your heart and what you want to see going forward. And if I hear from the majority of you, what I will do is I will take that as a signal to draft up a recommendation and provide that to your board leadership. For taking time to talk about challenging issues, for being transparent and open, both as your performance as a team as well as your performance as an individual. Your willingness to do that during a board meeting says a lot about who you are and who you want to be on behalf of students. Thank you for letting me share your time. Madam Chair.
Thank you so much, AJ. I really appreciate the facilitation of this conversation. It isn't easy. This is hard stuff. And I appreciate the willingness of board members to engage in it, to be self-reflective, and to do it publicly. So thank you. And I encourage board members to take AJ up on that offer. Reach out to him, send him an email, phone call, let him know how you'd like to move forward. I think we need to continue to have this kind of conversation to unify us as a group around what's important to us, which is clearly student outcomes. I appreciated hearing from everyone what they felt about why we're here and why we're doing what we're doing, what we want from this. So thank you, and thank you for taking the time. Board members and AJ especially, really appreciate your expertise in this area and helping us out. Thank you. Nate, did you want to add to that?
I think just the only thing I'd add is one, just a thanks to AJ, to the board, to folks that are watching us. What we went through tonight was raw, it was real, and and I think it really gets to how we can move forward. We've basically in a lot of ways laid a lot of things out on the table, and it's really up to us who will be on the board, who will be in here in January, and of course having OLE and Mohammed here tonight as well, I think is a good sign that that we're moving in the right direction to be the best stewards of not only this district but for our community and our students and families in a lot of ways. I don't see this as a negative. It's raw, it's real, like I said, but this was a powerful discussion, right? We've been under a lot of pressure. We've been under a lot of fire, in a lot of different ways. In a lot of ways, this is about as transparent as it gets. And I think that's really important, that we continue to move this work forward in that type of way. And I hope that that we continue to reach out to AJ and that we can develop a plan moving forward.
Thanks, Nate. We have a couple items left on our agenda. Moving to our action agenda, we have a discussion that was moved from consent, which was the at-risk definition. And it was Catherine who asked that that definition be removed from the consent agenda. So I want to go ahead and give Catherine an opportunity to describe what it is that she's looking for.
Thanks, Melissa. I appreciate this at-risk definition and the work that went into it. I just wanted to see a few more things. If we choose to do it this way, I think we should see a few more things included. The students who are in one of the largest, or who are in one of the largest ethnic demographic subgroups. I'm assuming that that is referring to our Latinx population, although it could mean in our district, since we now have a majority minority population, it actually could mean our Caucasian population. So I think we should specify that. I think also it leaves a lot of people out that are at risk. If we're going to talk about demographic subgroups, then I think we need to specify other subgroups that are at risk. For example, our Native populations are at huge risk typically. So this concerns me and who it leaves out. So if we're going to talk about demographics, then I think we should talk about, for example, our LGBTQIA+ students. We should talk about our refugee students. And like I said, our Native students. We might want to talk about our students with ACE indicators, or students with high ACE scores. Or else, if we're going to talk about, if we don't want to get into our demographics, we may want to talk only about all academic scores. So I think that we need to have either a more inclusive or a specifically academic definition when we talk about this. And so like I said, I just would like to see this have a little bit more specificity and maybe come back to us with more specifics.
Thanks, Catherine. I'm going to let Sandra Buendia talk about this. I know this is the recommendation and the work that they've done. So go ahead, Sandra.
Well, and thank you, Board Member Kennedy. What the background that the board doesn't know is that I tried to be more inclusive, and I had the more inclusive definition rejected twice because they kept saying I had to narrow it down to a specific demographic group, and they sent me examples. And this was as broad as I could make it. And so, and I'm happy to share. I didn't want to provide a whole lot of information. I can certainly send you a copy of the addendum to the application, because they sent me the request to submit an at-risk definition. They haven't asked us that before. They've allowed us to accept the Utah State Board of Education's definition in previous years, and this year they said we weren't allowed to do that. And I submitted much more global definitions, and they rejected them, as I said. However, here's the good news. It doesn't mean that we cannot use the funding for all the reasons that we're already using the funding for, which is to provide interventions for every demographic group that is, being either struggling or being underserved, right? Because there's a lot of reasons that students experience, have different educational experiences. So what we ended up doing is, you're right, we ended up in the application, and I'll not sure how to best send it. Maybe Superintendent Madden, would I send you that copy, that PDF copy of that second orange colored application, and then maybe you can send it to the board? Because then what you'll see is that we did for accountability purposes, and that's the other reason I kept getting it rejected. For accountability purposes, they really required me to choose a specific demographic group, and so I did choose the Latinx community, and I even within them, you know, are English, those who are English learners within that group, and then those who are English only, and we're using Acadians. Did I say that correctly? Yes, it's Acadians, right? You know, and those bands, as well as the reading inventory K-12. And so after my third attempt, third time was a charm, and I got it approved. But we are not, and they know that we are not going to limit the interventions that we're providing to just that one demographic group. We haven't done it in the past. We've never limited it. We've always worked hard to make sure that we are providing interventions to any identified demographic group that needs the support to be successful in you know, graduating high school and having a meaningful educational experience. And so I'm happy to send that to you.
I understand what you're saying, Sandra, and that your hands were tied by other forces. So if that's what the situation was, and you said that, you know, I accept this, then as, you know, that you know, you are including these people in your thoughts and in your definition, and that this is the way that you were instructed to define it by the state, then we'll go ahead with that, and I'll accept this document as it's written then.
And may I add one more thing? I can also, I'm happy to share with you it's not as beautiful a copy as, you know, because I had to download a copy of the application I sent through the Utah grant system, but I'm happy to share that with you because that actually received approval before they added the secondary request for that application that required the definition. And that one is very global. So just that way you have a basis of comparison, but our intent is completely to use those funds to support interventions for, you know, each and every one of our groups that needs that level of support.
Okay, that sounds great. And with that being said, I understand, you know, how you were working on this then, and I would move to accept this document and move it to, you know, into action from discussion.
I will second that.
And I thank you. And we need to have discussion on that motion, which I will let Dottie had her hand raised. So I want her to be able to discuss what she thought. So the motion is to move this to action. Go ahead, Dottie, go ahead and discuss.
I actually think I might be out of place here, but I know that the board already approved the consent agenda. I had something to say about the bullying policy. I can go now or I can wait, whichever one is correct.
So let's go ahead and wait and we'll take action on this one.
Okay, sounds good.
All right. The motion is to move the at-risk definition to action. Mike, do you want to speak to that?
Nope, I'm good.
Okay. Let's go ahead and vote on moving this to action.
Michelle Tutspo.
Mike DeMello, yes.
Catherine Kennedy, yes.
Nate Salazar, yes.
Samuel Hanson, yes.
Melissa Ford, yes.
Christy Sweat, yes.
Okay. All right. Now we have 2 items on our action agenda. We'll go ahead and start with the one we just moved to action, which was the at-risk definition. The motion was to move it to action, but to also approve the at-risk definition. Somebody want to reiterate that motion?
I move to approve the at-risk definition.
Okay, I've got a motion and a second. Was that Catherine seconding? Okay. Any discussion to the motion? Let's go ahead and vote.
Michelle Tutspo, yes.
Mike DeMello, yes.
Catherine Kennedy, yes.
Nate Salazar, yes.
Samuel Hanson, yes.
Melissa Ford, yes.
Christy Sweat, yes.
Okay, so the at-risk definition is approved. Thank you, Sandra, for all your work and your explanation. Really appreciate your openness with that.
Thank you all very much. And I appreciate the feedback, of course. You know, we're all in this together. So thank you so much.
Thank you. So the second item on our action agenda is about the RDA. And we have a motion that was moved to the action agenda and seconded. So I'm going to go ahead and have Sam have you read that motion. There's lots of pieces to it, so go slowly so board members can be writing it down so we can discuss the different pieces of the motion.
Okay, and feel free to stop me if you want me to reiterate something or clarify.
Okay, I'm going to be taking notes on it too, so I can repeat it as well.
Okay, so I move that we direct Business Administrator Alan Kersley, in consultation with the superintendent and board leadership, to supervise the drafting of an RDA policy based on the policy subcommittee's discussions, the materials attached tonight, and tonight's discussion, including President Ford's recommendation that the base year always be the same as the trigger year, and Representative Briscoe's recommendation that there be an option for a third-party study paid for by the RDA at the beginning of each project as well as at the end. Sorry, at the end as well as the beginning of each project. And that this finished policy be placed on the discussion agenda for the January 5th meeting. I further move that if Business Administrator Kersley and board leadership deem necessary, they may make use of board legal counsel Patrick Tanner as needed.
Second.
Okay. I'm not sure I got all of it, but it's direction to give Alan, the superintendent, board leadership to supervise the drafting of an RDA policy based on the policy subcommittee's discussion this evening, recommendation that the base year and the trigger year be the same, and that there be potentially be a study at the end and the beginning, and that draft language be moved on to discussion at the January 5th meeting. And
yeah,
potentially Patrick Tanner helping with that if necessary at the discretion of the superintendent and Alan. Did I capture all the pieces of that? We have that's the motion in the second. I'd like to open it for discussion about the motion. Go ahead, Christy.
So I'm not clear about the piece about Patrick, you know, of including him. Why would we need him to do that? Help me understand why we're including Patrick in that.
Well, I added that because I know that our board counsel, Christina Kindle, or our district lawyer, Christina Kindle, is very busy. And so I just wanted, you know, in the interest of honoring the work that the policy subcommittee did on this, I wanted it to move through smoothly. But I just wanted them to feel free to avail themselves of his services if they need that to get it ready for us by the next meeting.
So I think that could just be a part of the discussion. I don't think that needs to be a part of the motion, you know, but if everyone feels like it needs to be part of the motion, I think that, you know, reaching out for resources is a great idea. I know that Ms. Kindle does that when she's, you know, creating new policies, that she reaches out in multiple ways, either through the AG's office or through other colleagues. So just having, you know, for me, I think it's just, you know, a practice that she's already done, but that's just, you know, that would just be me.
Yeah, and it may just be one of those things that kind of goes without saying I just wanted to make sure that we weren't putting an excessive burden on anybody, because I know that there's a lot of extra work happening right now.
I think I'd echo what Christy's saying on that. I think if it goes without saying, maybe it should go without saying in this motion, and we just encourage the superintendent and Alan and Christina, who will be doing a lot of this work to reach out to all the resources available to her. The other piece, and I want to make sure other board members have an opportunity to weigh in. I'm just wondering why January 5th. I mean, knowing that we're busy and we have lots of things we're focusing on. I don't want to needlessly delay, Sam, but I also I want to make sure we're giving the time we need at a fairly an extremely busy time for the people we're asking. Maybe those go hand in hand with why you're asking for support from Patrick, but I don't want to necessarily put a date on this to rush the work. I would rather make sure that we're getting it done right and that they're ready to bring it to us when it's polished. So that's kind of how I feel on that. I mean, I don't feel strongly enough that I wouldn't support January 5th. I'm just not sure it's necessary for it to be January 5th. Any other comments from board members on the motion? Go ahead, Christy.
So this is a question for the policy committee. Do you have a meeting in December? So for me, I think that the conversation, what we're saying in the motion is that it goes to the policy committee with everybody working on it. And
That's
then
not what I said in the motion.
Oh, it wasn't, I'm sorry. So is it just going to Larry? So we're not going to the policy committee?
Well, it's already, so what you see in the agenda, board members and public, is more or less exactly what went to the policy subcommittee. So that's why I felt like it had gone to the policy committee, and to the extent that it needed to. Since we're discussing it, I mean, I won't be there, but since it's being discussed again as a full board discussion, certainly there could be changes that the board would want to make to it. I guess I just felt like it had gotten sufficient reading at the policy subcommittee meeting. And of course, that'll be a different subcommittee meeting next year. I'm happy to have those conversations that I had one-on-one with each of those people again with the new policy subcommittee, but I just don't know if so that just feels like extra work as well. But I guess I just feel like we've done quite a bit of work on this, and the next step is getting it into a form that looks like the rest of our policies. And my sense, and correct me if I'm wrong, Michelle, Nate, and Catherine, but my sense was that you had sort of reached a conclusion where you were ready to see that final draft. If that's not true, then let me know, and we can think about a different way of going through this. But given that they seem to be happy to let Alan manage that process, it seems like that would be the next step to me.
So I guess for me, that's news to me. I did not know, I mean, because that wasn't the direction that was given from, and you know what, never mind. I feel like, I'm not trying to hold this up, but, if process, doesn't, matter on how we handle this, again, I just think that my understanding was that I had no idea that the subcommittee had all of these pieces, and that you were going to recommend, because you're not recommending a policy to the board. What you've done is you've, given us all of these pieces. So, if you're saying let's, go around the subcommittee where they wouldn't be working, and that Alan and Larry and Christina come with the policy and they bring it back on the 5th, if that's what the motion is, then that's great. Then that's what the motion is. But I did not know that that's what the subcommittee had been doing, because that wasn't the direction that was given from the board. So I'm not trying to hold this up. I already said in my comments that I think it's good for us to move towards that. So I'm done talking about it then. Thanks.
I don't think there's any reason why it can't come back to the subcommittee before it comes. I mean, I think it'll go through to the board. So I feel perfectly comfortable with it coming back to the policy subcommittee. I mean, we've been talking about it, and I don't think we've done anything that was away from what the board intent was originally. Christy, just so you know, I don't think that you would have been unhappy with anything that we talked about in terms of how we've handled it. But I think that it can come back through at our next policy meeting, and then can come back on the next time we see policies. It will automatically be talked about because it'll be a new policy. And so if I offer that as a friendly amendment to Sam's motion, and I don't see it as delaying it. I don't see that it will delay it in any sense that will matter, because I don't think we'll see another RDA proposal before then.
Sam, do you accept the friendly amendment?
Yeah, that's fine with me, as long as it's the three of you and we don't wait until next year. I think
well, it'll probably be, then would you like us to hold another policy committee? Because I think we could if we wanted to.
I think you could, and that would be fine with me. I don't know that it's necessary, but if the three of you would like to do that, I'm open to that.
Sure. I think we could probably, is that okay with you, Michelle and Nate? Because I think we could probably hold a 15-minute meeting.
You think that, so Catherine, I appreciate what you're trying to do. I do. But, and I think we're just getting, we're chasing our tail right now, just to be able to say that it has to be you three, that are involved in this. Whereas we have great board members, this policy is going to be reflective on them too. And, to include them into the discussion is not a bad thing. I mean, there'll be one new person on policy committee, and that's it.
Right. Yeah, I think that's right. I think that we could either have it with this, if this policy, how about if we do it this way? If this policy committee can find a time, then we will do it. And if we can't, then we'll put it on to the next committee. Would that be okay? If we can find a time in December, then great. And if we can't, then we won't.
Go ahead, Michelle.
I'm wondering though, are we going to have enough time to have that written out? I mean, because we're talking about Christina having to write this out before we meet, and we talked about it before, and then she talked about having it ready for this meeting, but not realizing the quick turnaround time and the time that she didn't have to write it. So that would be my concern, is having her rush and try to write something. I would prefer that she had some time to really spend on it and get the wording right before.
Sure.
Before.
Why don't we just say if it works, then we can get it done. I mean, we don't have another board meeting this month, so that'll simplify things. And, we have a month, and if we can make it happen, then we'll do it. And if we can't, then we'll have the next policy committee. And like Christy says, there'll be one new person on the policy committee, and we can have it move forward that way.
You support that friendly amendment, Sam?
Yeah, Superintendent Madden was going to say.
Oh, sorry, I missed you, Superintendent. Go ahead.
You're talking about, like, if we change the target date from the 5th to the 19th, we could have I mean, that would provide it plenty of time for the writing part, time for a policy subcommittee meeting if we need to do that piece before it comes back, and then it could just come back on the 19th rather than the 5th. Just as a thought.
I think Sam, go ahead, Sam. You muted yourself.
As long as it's the existing committee.
It may not, if we push it to January, it may have that one more board member. So what you want to do, Sam, is just push this motion with the existing policy committee, but willing to move the January date to the second January meeting.
Yeah, sure. That sounds good.
I'm hearing support from the board though for just moving this to that. I'm hearing support for moving it to the second January meeting. That the other pieces of the agenda of the motion, general support for general direction for Christina, the superintendent, to seek whatever advice or counsel they need to for that. But I guess I'm not hearing general consensus about it being the existing policy committee. I would love board members to weigh in on that.
Well, I think that if this is important to Board Member Hanson, then I think it's something that he's invested a lot of time in, and I feel like I'm happy to meet as a policy committee. I don't know how many of us are going anywhere for the holidays. I'm staying put, and I think that we can go back to Board Member Hanson's suggestion that if our district attorney, Kendall, does not have time to draft it, then we could have it at assistance with our board attorney to do that. So I think, we've got a couple options. My expectation is that board attorney or district attorney Kendall is very efficient and usually does a great job drafting things, and that she probably will have no trouble doing it. I don't want to speak. Oh, she's on. She's actually here. She could maybe speak for herself.
Yes, Christina, if you want to weigh in.
Yeah, we could have her weigh in. So.
So I guess what I would say is that I think since Board Member Hanson already provided, a good outline and framework for it, that it shouldn't take that long. And I guess I'm just not sure that we all need to meet, via Zoom meeting. I mean, I could send it out to the subcommittee for feedback and just copy the entire board. I don't really see that as a problem getting that done before the 21st. It would just really be if the subcommittee didn't like what it looked like and wanted it changed. It just might not be ready depending on when the agenda got sent out for the first board meeting. And obviously at the first board meeting, the new board members would be voting on it. So, and that would include the new board member who would be sitting on the subcommittee. But I don't think that if I start working on it, that I couldn't possibly have it done before we go on break.
Great.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that, Christina.
And it could be on the 19th, since we're going to have to discuss it if we feel like there's too much on the 5th, as long as we meet. I personally would enjoy the opportunity to have a Zoom meeting with Nate and Michelle and Ellen and Larry and Christina. I would look forward to that. I would like that opportunity. In fact, I might even drop a bottle of Martinelli's off at each of their houses and the district.
I think all Michelle needs is a bottle of.
So I want Ben and Jerry's. I know, I love it.
Right.
I do want to make sure that we're honoring process, and that we're covering our bases. That way, I hear that from everybody.
Yeah.
And as long as the board feels comfortable that we're honoring our process, following the things that we have set out in our process for how this gets done, so that it has the feedback from the board as it sits now, but also feedback because the board as it is seated in January will be the board that's voting on it, and all future boards will be reviewing it and weighing in on it. I just want to make sure it has the strength of having come through the process. So that's where I feel, and I guess I'm not entirely sure that it wouldn't be following the process. I just want to make sure. I appreciate what Christina is saying, and I think if the board supports that process and that's the right way to do it, then I support that. This is something that I feel like is a good thing for us to do, and I hear that overwhelmingly from the board, that the board supports the idea of these guiding principles in the form of a policy about an RDA. So that piece, it seems like we're generally in support of from every board member. So I just want to make sure we're honoring the process as we take this to the next steps, and honoring the work that board member Hanson has put into it, the time that's invested with the current policy subcommittee on getting it all outlined. So if Christina feels comfortable that she's able to write that policy and email it to that board, I'm really to the policy committee, and the board to talk about it the second meeting of January, I would support all of that. Any other comments? Sam, go ahead.
That sounds good to me, and I appreciate everyone accommodating each other, and you know, I appreciate all the work that's gone into this from all sides. So do we want to amend my motion to reflect that the 19th is a better time? Does somebody want to do that, and then we can vote on it?
I think you could amend it to say either the 5th or the 19th. Sam, it's your motion. So if you chose to take that friendly amendment or to amend it yourself, that would be fine.
Okay, so amended.
Are we clear on what the motion is? I think particularly Christina, Alan, and Larry, I'd like you to weigh in if you're clear on what the motion is. Board members, since you'll be voting on it, I want to make sure you're clear as well.
I'm clear.
Yep, I feel like we are.
Okay. Board members, do you feel clear on what the motion is? Okay. All right, we've got the motion on the table in a second. Motion from Sam, second from Catherine. We've discussed it. Let's go ahead and vote on it.
Michelle Tweetsbo, yes.
Mike Nomelka, yes.
Catherine Kennedy, yes.
Nate Salazar, yes.
Samuel Hanson, yes.
Melissa Ford, yes.
Sweat, yes.
All right. That concludes our action agenda. Thank you, board members. The next up is our board member report. Do I have any board members that would like to make a report? Thank you all for your participation. Go ahead, Sam, then Catherine.
Go ahead, Catherine.
I just wanted to mention to all three of our departing board members how much I appreciate your contributions to this board and how much I've enjoyed working with you all. And I don't want to make this meeting much longer, but I really think that all of you have made wonderful contributions. And I admire what you've done. I think, Mike, that you've added a lot to this board and you've done a lot to increase our awareness of a lot of people in our district and the fact that we should be paying employees more and done things like that. And I think Melissa summarized it well, and I appreciated what she said. And I really appreciate what you've done in that regard, and your enthusiasm for things like vocational ed or CTE. I think you often call it vocational ed. Sometimes we call it CTE, and I appreciate how you've advocated for those things. And Sam, I think you've done a marvelous job working on behalf of the schools in your district, and you just caught on to everything so amazingly fast. I just thought it was incredible how you picked up with everything. It sounded like you'd been a board member your entire life, which you probably had. You mastered all the issues and brought us really into awareness about things like the RDA and all sorts of things. You were an ally and a colleague in ways that were really remarkable. And Michelle, I can't believe that you took on what you took on. It was remarkable, and I really appreciated you're the best sport in the world. And I just think that you were a wonderful colleague, and I appreciated the fact that you were a great sport at the time. And I just wanted to thank you so much for all three of you for what you've done. And I think you've made wonderful contributions. And I really appreciate the fact that you've been here for all the time that you've done, each one of you. And I thank each one of you from the bottom of my heart. I really do.
Thank you for your kind words, Catherine. Thank you so much. And I, obviously echo that. Thank you. Any other comments from board members, board member reports? I know that you're all up to really good things. Thank you. I hear the work you're doing in your precincts and in your communities, and it's good. So thank you for that. I would only mention that the superintendent referred to the weekly meeting that he and I attend with the county health director. The invitation for me to report on that to each of you is still standing. I'm happy to share all of that information with you. A lot of it's brand new, and specifically the superintendent will share from this morning's meeting with you at the request of Christy. So thank you for that. I have a quick update from Ray and Associates, and I just want to pull that up. Our superintendent position is posted, and let's see. They sent out an invitation to 1,283 individuals to apply for the position and advertised the position in the following: AASA, NABSE, Ed Week, which will be live on December 18th, ALIS, which will be live December 18th, the Ladders, the National Association of School Superintendents, and in various Utah publications. That's through USBA, USSA, and UASBO. And they've already received 15 applications from places including Utah, Illinois, Washington, New Mexico, New Hampshire, North Dakota, Florida, New York, Texas, Wisconsin, and Georgia. And Molly's comment to me was that we have a lot of interest in the position from a lot of highly qualified superintendents. So that's my update. If you've got more questions about that, feel free to reach out to me or to Ray and Associates. I'm going to sorry, we also have the need for a short closed executive meeting for an update from Ms. Kindle. And I will need to take a motion for that closed executive session in this meeting. And then I want to turn the time over to the superintendent if he's got a superintendent report.
I don't have a superintendent report. Just a thank you to Sam and Michelle and Mike, and really appreciate you guys. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Superintendent.
Melissa, what are we going into closed session for, just so that we know what the motion is?
As Superintendent, I'm not entirely sure. Superintendent, will you go ahead and answer that?
Litigation.
Litigation.
Oh, for litigation. Okay. I move that we go into closed session for the purpose of litigation.
Second.
I'll second.
Second. Okay. Can we quickly discuss that before we vote? Just what the sort of the mechanics of that, Superintendent. Do you want us to end this meeting and send us another link?
No, we can stay in here. I can turn off the live
closed
stream.
session, or do you want us to stay in this meeting?
I think you can stay in this one, and then
Okay.
everybody that doesn't need to be in the closed session can just drop out of here. So
Okay.
yeah, once you vote, I'll turn off the live
Okay.
stream.
So that will be the mechanics. Board members will vote on this motion, and then just keep yourselves muted and stay on this link. We have a motion to go into closed session for the purpose of litigation. Let's go ahead and vote.
Michelle Tuitepo, yes.
Mike Namalka, yes.
Catherine Kennedy, yes.
Nate Salazar, yes.
Samuel Hansen, yes.
Melissa Ford, yes.